Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Destiny. What is this called? The Untitled Destiny Podcast. I like how I just start immediately. This is the second episode I think I've recorded in a row where I've just totally forgotten what the podcast is. Where I've just gone off immediately on a tangent. We're like 15 seconds in and I haven't even finished the introduction. But never know. Yes, this is the Untitled Destiny Podcast, and obviously we're still without a proper name. Maybe this is eventually its official name. I don't know, but that is something I'm thinking about still, which I keep saying, and we are we're 4 weeks in now. So a month in, basically. But I have one name idea, but I just kind of want to think about a bit more about it, and I'm kind of strung up by a bunch of other things. So, yeah, who knows? But yeah, it's been obviously a month since I started this. What was it? I don't know, what was it? It was the 3rd of July, I guess, was the first episode, right? So yeah, time flies, pretty crazy. So yeah, on today's show, there's I got a few things to get into, sort of a bit of what's going on in the game, as well as some discussion of what's coming in the future. There's been a couple of leaks and sort of discussions I've got planned, I want to talk about that are related to what might be shown or what will probably be shown at the showcase in 3 weeks. And I'm imagining that potentially by the next time I record an episode, there will be some teasers and maybe more leaks, who knows, but at least more information that will be pertaining to next season and probably Final Shape. And yeah, and at the end, I sort of wanted to discuss a little bit about. So I've got like a bunch of different news things to go over, and then I've got one topic at the end that I want to get into. But we'll get more into that later. So first, I just want to get into a few PSAs, one regarding the show, and then a bunch of others related to Destiny itself. So if you listen to the most recent episode of the What I'm Playing podcast, it'll be about a week ago this was posted, or probably 8 days now, because this will probably go up on the Tuesday. I've sort of been not been feeling too well recently, so this kind of got delayed, and need to figure out a better plan. I think. Well, I say a better plan. I've got a better plan, but that kind of ties into what I'm saying here. I basically spoke for nearly 20 minutes on the last episode of What I'm Playing to talk about a schedule that's kind of in the midst of change, and to also discuss an article that I've been sort of working on that's kind of talking about what I've been doing the last few years, how I felt looking back at that, and how I felt at the time, and what I'm doing now and going forward to kind of hopefully alleviate some of those problems and also keep up to date, essentially, whilst I'm also able to sort of carry on doing freelance work for Eurogamer and whatever else. I won't really go over that here. If you want to go and listen to that, you can go to that show in particular. But the short of the long of it all is basically as follows. So I want to reduce the focus on these Destiny shows, not so much with this main show, but because most of Destiny, because it's a podcast dedicated to like one game, most of the discussions that I'm going to have will be in this single show, and so the extra episodes that I was planning to do one every week or every 2 weeks, sorry. I sort of think that doesn't need to exist really. That was kind of just me overdoing it. It was also a bit of a sort of sudden idea that I came up with in that particular moment, so I just don't think that that's really needed consistently. However, even though I want to use those sparingly now and again, I will, my intent at least, and if there's enough to talk about, will be to have one specifically focused on the showcase, which obviously is on the 22nd of August, and that would release on the Friday. And the only really reason that I'm thinking of doing that is because that particular week is the What I'm Playing podcast, and I sort of, I'd prefer to sort of just keep to a schedule if I can, but then also kind of focus, because there'll be a lot to talk about both with the season and news and things like that. I'll focus on talking about Final Shape and everything else relating to that and the showcase in that particular show, and then on the Friday that week, hopefully I'll have a show going up that will kind of discuss everything related to that. The showcase, and then the following week will be the main podcast, and then I'll kind of discuss everything else. Both at focus primarily on the season, my thoughts and everything, and kind of rounding up things there. The schedule I'm kind of sort of wanting to change to essentially means there'll be a games focused show every week. And so every Monday we'll alternate between What I'm Playing and on this Untitled Destiny podcast, and then I will publish a What I'm Playing Plus. That's my aim anyway, on the Friday of the same week that there's the Untitled Destiny podcast. So essentially that'll be this Friday. So you'll have, which obviously I sort of spoke about last week because I did my favorite games of the year so far, and the second part of that, my goal is to hopefully finish Final Fantasy 16 finally, and then publish that on Friday. And then anytime I publish an Untitled Destiny podcast extra, that will go up on the Friday of What I'm Playing show weeks. So this will be in that case for the that you'll see that happen on the the week of the final shape and showcase reveal. But the core of all of this is that I want to at least keep up with these weekly shows, and if that becomes a problem, I will drop the Destiny one, unfortunately, first, because I want to keep making sure I'm sort of focusing on the games podcast. But I don't really think I will ultimately, because I sort of think that, you know, I like this place. Because I was thinking I could move this to a monthly show if absolutely, you know, if I needed to. But I don't really think that feels like that would be a lot to kind of plan for, and then would that mean it would be like a 3 or 4 hour show, and I don't really want to do that. And that's a lot of news rounding up. I think every 2 weeks kind of keeps it a bit more focused, and there is even still a lot of stuff to cover. Like in this episode, I actually think this might be the most there's to cover, and so this one could actually be the longest episode. We'll see. But yeah, the minimum of keeping a show every week is to just kind of keep me in the loop with everything. You know, let me air my thoughts on what's going on in news, what I'm playing, speak on various topics that feel relevant. And yeah, and that's obviously as a sort of response to me feeling like I couldn't really do that before because I was so focused on writing, and that's all I would kind of focus on primarily. I used to stream a bit, but that was kind of my outlet for that, and then I kind of stopped streaming, and I wouldn't mind getting back into streaming, but I think constantly writing, I almost need a bit of a break from it, and I sort of want to formulate a better sort of plan for that. And so podcasts, I think, are hopefully going to be a way that, and plus I write the show, and so it kind of combines both, and hopefully adds more value that way with a, you know, an hour or two show, hopefully a week. So yeah, so the weekly shows, and then I can use the remaining time essentially to focus on recording videos maybe, or posting articles, you know, playing games. And so yeah, that's the whole intent. Obviously, as I said, the schedule's still in a bit of flux. That's why this one might be Tuesday, because it is still all over a bit. Sorry, I can't even talk. Still all over the place a little bit, and so I apologize for that. But you know, again, the goal weekly show at least, and hopefully for the Monday. The Tuesday isn't too bad for something like Destiny, because Tuesdays are like it's Destiny's reset day, so I think it makes sense anyway. But I think Monday's just a nice. I like, at least for me, Monday is sort of a nice sort of schedule day. So as I said, I've spoken for a while on this, but there's a bit more of a deeper discussion on the last episode of what I'm playing, so be sure to check out that if you want more information on that. And of course, as per usual, if you have any thoughts or feeling, or like feedback or anything like that, be sure to post them in the comments below. Any questions as well, go and post them. And so yeah, so moving on, we'll just get through some sort of game-related PSAs about, you know, things that are kind of smaller news topics that we can go through before getting into like what's going on in the game and some larger news topics. So the first one here is I've done my thing again where I've like only bolded like part of the text. That's very, very good of me. I always miss something. But for anyone that doesn't know, basically when I write these, I then go through afterwards and kind of edit them and bold certain pieces of like phrases and words to kind of stand out more, so that I can kind of like easily jump between them. Because effectively, I'm writing the entire show in bullet point format, but it's almost that it could be an article in its own way, you know. But that would require more editing, and I don't spend too long on it. But yeah, so the first thing is that Bungie recently made a change whereby there's a more complicated process that is required to delete characters. And so previously, you would basically hold square or whatever button it is to be X on Xbox. I think it's E on PC. I could be wrong, and maybe it's not E. I don't know. But you'd have to hold it, and then it would be like, "Are you sure you want to delete this character?" And you'd press you'd confirm or deny whether you want to. They basically made it now so that on top of that, you know, hold the button, and then you press a single button to confirm. You now hold that button on the character you want to delete, and then it will give you a sequence of buttons or keys to press to confirm it, and then that would then delete the character. And so this seems like it's a really nice change, because there's actually been a few instances where people have accidentally deleted characters, and I think it's good that they've made something more complicated. I do think it is a good change. I haven't tried it, obviously I don't want to, but I'm curious to know if anyone has tried it. But I almost feel like that sequence of buttons you have to press and confirm, I feel like they should make all of those a hold as well. You know, it might seem awkward to people, but it's like, but that would then, I think, really just pretty much, because I'm sure, as unlikely as it is, you know, and I assume it's an automated generated each time set of keys, and so it's very unlikely that'll happen, but it's almost like, it is possible that someone, by some accidental thing, I'm not saying, so like the case before, for example, that happened was that someone was loading the game, then got a black screen, and then when they got to the character screen, it came with a pop-up so quickly, and I don't know if it's that they pressed the button quick or something, but something happened where they basically reacted to something that was on the screen for basically barely a second, and then suddenly deleted one of their characters or something. So this isn't, I'm not saying this is like, yeah, I mean, it's very unlikely someone's going to sit at the home screen and be like, I'm going to accidentally hold the button and then accidentally type in a specific code. I'm sure maybe someone would put attention or something ridiculous, but more my point is, if there was ever a situation where it's like that other instant where, you know, it is possible that someone by sheer chance presses specific buttons. It is very unlikely, but I just think that just to add that little extra kind of, you know, I guess security, or to, you know, protection, that I think holding those buttons on that sequence would be better, if that's not a thing. But yeah, they just tweeted that out. I don't think even know if it was in the patch notes, but yeah. So the next thing, this is a very short thing, but basically they've told us that we're going to be getting more developer insight articles in the future. We've got one to talk about in this particular article, but it sounds like we're going to get at least 2 more. They say, quote, "We'll have more to chat about before the reveal action starts, including a few more standalone articles to dive a little bit deeper into the world of Destiny 2, end quote." So them saying few more, I don't know if that means 1 a week. There's only 3 weeks left till the showcase, so I don't know if that means, if it means 1 a week, if it means maybe 2 in 1 week or something, I don't know. But there's at least, I feel like there's got to be at least 2, right? 3 weeks left, 2, you know, so it might be 1 a week. I feel like they could have just said 1 a week if that's what they were planning to, but, you know, nonetheless, cool, and I'll be interested in what we'll be talking about. Next, I just want to mention about the community emblem winner. Basically, there was a contest during the Bungie Day celebration sort of charity stuff, where basically people could design their own emblems and send them in, and they can end up sort of getting put into the game. And apparently these were voted on by Bungie employees, and they sort of say here, quote, "2 weeks ago, we announced our first ever worldwide Bungie community emblem art contest with the help of the Bungie Foundation and as part of the Bungie Day celebration," end quote. And they gave the winner they selected was someone called Alex. They are at A_W_MONT, Mont, on Twitter. If you want to go and check them out and follow them or whatever. But they had a emblem titled A Guardian's Notebook. And I seriously thought this was such a really unique and just great emblem, honestly. And it's a really, really cool, and I think it's very almost nostalgic. You know, because it's just it shows like a bunch. It literally is like, it looks like a notebook, and it's just all little scribblings and drawings of different things. And there's even a little sentence there that says something with a G, Gary, which is obviously a nice little reference to that initial reveal trailer for Destiny 2 that Cade says. It's got like a drawing of Saint 14 on it, the ghost, and some other things, and it's just a really cool, unique idea that I'm curious, you know, curious to see that in game. I'm sort of interested to know how they're going to give this out. If it's just going to be a simple code, are they going to make it an Eververse purchase? I don't see why they would, but that's what they did with the last community thing. I assume they wouldn't, but you never know. But sounds really cool. Sounds, you know, congrats to Alex for that. It will be really cool to see that in the game, and you know, yeah, so we'll see more whenever they announce more, basically. The next thing is they posted, Bungie Foundation on their Twitter page posted a bunch of different videos from various actors that play different Destiny characters, including like lore readings and sort of them thanking the community for the donations. So they had Mara Junot, I hope I pronounced the name right, who she's obviously plays Ikora, Todd Habercorn, who plays the Drifter, Erika Ishii, who plays Anna Bray, Fred See, I messed this up. He said it in the video, and I can't remember now, but I think it's Tatashaw, I think. I apologize if I messed that up, but he is of course, from the weekly vendor that shows up, Squiggly Face. I apologize to any of the names I butchered. And a name I can't butcher, Nolan North was the last video they posted, and obviously he is Ghost and Cade 6 in Forsaken. He also was Jisoo Colorado in Lightfall, which is really interesting because I had no idea it was him, and then when I knew it was him, I could hear it every time. But yeah, I thought these little videos were really cool. I always think it's nice to have these extra kind of voice work, and it's also cool to kind of see the actors in their natural habitat, as it were, doing their thing, kind of thing. And yeah, it sort of makes me wish that we had more of this kind of thing, like audio logs and things like in the actual game, you know, we could listen to, or like have the ghost read us lore. I think that'd be really interesting. But that's pie in the sky, totally unrelated. But yeah, really cool, and definitely check them out. They're all really cool. Next thing is they've announced the new Prime Gaming rewards, which you can go and get right now. They're available till August 30th, I think. At least just I'm going to say the end of August, just in case. But there's the Catching Rays Exotic Solstice emote, Soul Piercer Exotic Solstice ship, the Blue Sky Shell Legendary Ghost Shell, and there's the High Surf Solstice-themed Legendary Ghost Protection. I didn't get to check this, but I think that Ghost Protection is actually Prime Gaming exclusive. I could be wrong, but they keep doing this from time to time. I've noticed where they give away an emblem or something else with it that you can't get in the game. So I think that might be unique or exclusive. Of course, these are available if you have Amazon Prime, along with a bunch of other in-game bonuses and rewards and items that you can get for other games. They do sometimes give away free games. Obviously, you have to link your Bungie account with Prime Gaming, redeem these on the Prime Gaming website, and then you can collect them from the Cryptarch in the game if you've done that all correctly. One small thing as well here is that they've obviously got their Bungie Rewards collection stuff that you can get for Solstice. You can complete the in-game triumph called Fuel for the Fire, and if you do that during Solstice before 9:59 a.m. PDT on August 8th, you can purchase a pair of Solstice-themed sunglasses from the Bungie store, which actually don't look too bad. I actually kind of like the look of them, honestly. But yeah, that's just a quick PSA there for that. And just kind of wrapping up here, I've got a couple more things. There are 2 Trials weapons that are going to be leaving the pool at the end of this current season. There's the Adept variant of the Unwavering Duty machine gun and the Exalted Truth hand cannon. These, or the Adept versions of these, won't be attainable in Season 22. So basically, yeah, if you want to get them, you're going to have to get them before the end of the season. You'll still be able to get the guns, the base versions of the guns, by focusing engrams at Same 14. Currently, Unwavering Duty is available during Trials, and I believe it's its last weekend to get it right now. So this is probably going to go up on the Tuesday, so this might be up before reset, but if it's not, then that'll be gone, and you won't be able to get it anymore as the Adept version. But then the Exalted Truth hand cannon, the last weekend it will be available as an Adept drop is on August 4th, so that'll be next weekend, or this weekend, sorry, starting Friday. So yeah, if you want the Adept versions of those, make sure to grab them before they go. And they've also mentioned, sort of relating to that a reprised weapon and a new weapon will be coming in Season 22, but I'll get into the specifics of all that later because I've been talking about this economy blog post, this dev insight post, and they do mention about the new weapons coming to those pools or reprisals or whatever, so I'll get into that later. And a last sort of quick announcement that Bungie put on their Destiny Dude team account is that you'll be able to transmog the Solstice armor from Season 22, from 2022 and 2023. Next season, you'll be able to transmog those both the non-glow and glow versions of those armor, the ones you could earn in the game. There's not much to say here. I thought it was really cool. It's nice that they've done this, but I think transmog still sucks, honestly, and I really think that they need to make some changes to that because, it's funny to me when you sort of read that they're like, oh yeah, based on player feedback, but it's like a really minor change kind of thing, and I understand it's just wording, but it's sort of like people have criticized Transmog since it was added, and we just basically didn't see any changes. We saw one change, but it was like really minor. And of course, it is funny. I thought about this yesterday when I was writing this, that when you complete a bounty, you get the Synthweave token, but you can't immediately spend. Oh, you get the Synthweave materials, but you can't immediately spend it. You have to run to the tower just hold the button to exchange it, then you get it, and then you can use it. But of course, if you just buy it from the store, you get to use it straight away. But my main issue is that they should just remove the cap. I don't care about the grind, honestly. Like, they can keep whatever grind they want. I just think the cap of 10 per character per season is really stupid. Especially when you think the Solstice non-glow and glow armors are coming, and that means that's essentially 4 armor sets you can transmog, of which you only have enough for 2 in a season. You only have enough, there's only enough transmog piece, currency that you can earn a season to have 2, or to be able to transmog 2 things. So, sorry, 2 armor sets, sorry. So yeah. And then I've got a few known issues here. I don't think I need to go through these. I will just say that the the bolstering detonation, focusing strike, impact induction, and momentum transfer armor mods are still disabled. They were disabled a few days ago, and they are still, as of right now, disabled in the game. No idea if they're going to be fixed. And there's also a few Solstice items that are missing from collections as well, and there's a couple of others, but you can also check the most recent Twib for those if you want to know what they are fully. They usually update them at the end of the post, or towards the end of it. Next, I'm going to get into some basically what's been going on in the game, talk about my Solstice thoughts, since I never actually posted that. I actually totally forgot to address that, but effectively, I was going to make a extra episode, or UDP, Untitled Destiny Podcast extra episode specifically focused on Solstice, and then I never got around to it. And I was meant to tweet about it. I don't think I did, but I just didn't either get. I didn't play the thing much, but I also didn't think there was much to talk about, honestly, overall. So I thought I might as well just wait here, and I think that was a good choice because there still really isn't much to talk about. But anyway, let's get into what I actually think of Solstice. So yeah, obviously this episode's probably going to go up on the 1st of August, which is the sort of third reset of Solstice, and so there's only 1 week left of Solstice as of now. So I've played a bit of it. I've not played too much of it. I actually still have. I think I've fully upgraded 1 piece of armor. Plans to try and get to the rest before the end of the week, but I'm not really feeling that motivated to actually play it. This is probably the least I've played Destiny in a long time, I think, but also just in... Well, I say in a long time. I've been playing less and less Destiny, I think, over time, but particularly during an event, usually I'm like, oh, when the event's on, I'll jump on, I'll do, like, a bunch of the... I'll, like, finish the story, and I'll, carry on with, I'll do the event and everything like that, and that actually hasn't really happened this time, because I'd already finished the story, and I didn't actually properly start playing Solstice until, like, the 2nd week, I think. Which is weird, because usually I'm in there straight away. I did play a bit of it, and I still loaded up a reset on the day it came out, and I got, like, my armor set and everything, and I think I played 1 Bonfire Bash. And then I didn't play more until, like, the following week. But, yeah, there's not too much really to say. I think if you've played Solstice before, you already know what to kind of expect. But this event, this version of the event with the activity being Bonfire Bash, I just think is just a much worse activity compared to the usual European aerial zone that we used to get. And it's not any worse, like, it feels, like, it just feels really slow and very back and forth, like, and not back and forth in a nice flow. It's just kind of like you jump, you're on one end of the map, you're on the other end of the map, you're on the other end, and then you're going back and forth between those, and getting across is really awkward, and that's partly because we can't Sparrow right now. I think as of reset today, we will be able to. I don't know why they decided to wait until, I guess it was probably a quick fix that they could add in. There is actually a hotfix going out today, which is, I assume, will probably allow that. But that's like, you've hotfixed him just for 1 week. I'm assuming it's, well, not hotfix. I guess it's not technically class. I don't think they're classing those hotfix now because it'll be a client download. But yeah, I just, bit of a weird thing. I guess it's probably something that they can easily sort of turn on and off. Well, I say today, maybe it's easier. Maybe, I don't know if it's a server side thing or if it is a, requires an update for the game sort of thing. But it would be much better to have just been able to use the Sparrow straight away through the event. But not just that, the flow of the original EAZ was a lot better because you would be moving around to a lot of different points across the map, and there would sometimes be long traversal points, but the traversal would be across the rooftops a lot of the time, whereas in this version, you barely even go to, like, I don't know, like 60-70% of the map because there's no reason to. And it's one of those that's like, it feels like the flow of this Bonfire Bash is just not there. And I really, it's almost, I guess it's just them trying to make a different version so that we're not just, like, doing the same exact, like, activity, every year, but, not building new spaces kind of thing. They instead just sort of keeping it in the same level, but just kind of trying something else. But I don't know why they went this route, because I think the thing is obviously the whole point of this is that you go out, you kill enemies, you pick up their, like, essence, and you throw it at the bonfire in like the center of the map. But it's sort of like even the throwing is kind of awkward. Like, sometimes you'll notice if you throw it, like, it sometimes weirdly locks on and other times misses, and you've got, like, it's like, oh, I don't even know how that misses, like, and I sort of almost think that maybe the bonfire should have been, like, in the air. Like, I don't know how that would have made any sense, but, like, maybe it should have been floating above the air, like, the level. And maybe you would have had to be jumping around the rooftops to actually, fight these enemies, and kind of you're moving around that way, and then that would make way more sense for these. There are, like, those Cabal, like, booster things that you jump in that kind of, like, shoot you off into, like, whatever direction. They don't make a whole lot of sense here. Like, you do need to get on rooftops at times, but it's sort of, they're really awkward, and the worst part about them is that I don't know if this would really cause. I guess they don't want to cause problems, but it's like they lock you into your trajectory and they don't let you break out of it. So like one time I jumped in it and I was like, oh, what happens if I use a strand grapple like off to the side? And the grapple slows me down because obviously I'm pulling again. I'm pushed all of the weight of the grapple pull is pulling me against the cabal like sort of booster pathway trajectory or whatever. But then what happened is it just cut off my grapple and it just shot me to where I was going anyway. Like it didn't let me break out of it. And that's not like a problem with this event necessarily. I just think that kind of stuff like that can kind of really make it annoying because it's like sometimes you might be like, oh no, I made a mistake, I want to get out of this, and then suddenly you can't kind of thing. And I sort of just think that the flow of the mode previously was a lot better, and it also utilized the platforming a lot more. Like it was actually a really decent use of Destiny's like platforming sort of aspects as well as combat kind of thing, and then you would have the boss at the end. And then what was interesting was that you had to go and collect as many chests at the end as possible to get these Solstice key fragments, and then you would use those to I think you then use those to open Solstice packages, which would drop like different armor pieces. To me that was such a better flow. Like I just and what's really weird as well is that when this bonfire drops your rewards, they like get stuck on like they can get stuck on like the bush or like that's near it, or they can or it's such a wide area that they can drop out in that you never really know if you've missed something or not. It's just a really weird way to do things. I sort of miss the. I've always thought the whole idea of having packages to open is a really good, like a really strong loop in Destiny, because you can have the core gameplay loop of rewards by playing and then earning rewards, but then as you're playing, you're also earning like a bit of currency, and then as as you're playing and earning rewards naturally, you're also getting this currency, which then you can spend on these packages to then open, which then gives you additional drops. And I just think that is a nice kind of bonus way. It's a bit like reputation in a way. But I think the idea of it being a physical item that you actually get to drop kind of thing, you're always like, oh cool, I've got a package, oh cool, I've got these. And they could drop Solstice armor, and but then again, I suppose you don't need the armor so much this time because you can just get one armor set and then re-roll the stats because of the whole like using getting your silver leaves, then playing Bonfire Bash and turning them into silver ash, and then using the ash to then change the stats on the armor. And it's not a terrible system. I just think the old system. I like the stat re-rolling thing, but I also think that it also just kind of shows how they've got like a 3-week event where you can like have probably the most armor customization you have in the entirety of Destiny, and it kind of exposes Destiny's armor problem, I think, more, because it's just like, oh cool, now I can have one set of armor that I can basically grind out and make the absolute best, and then I effectively never need to get another armor set again if I don't want to. Obviously you might need to if you want to adjust your stats in different ways, but generally I think a lot of people kind of find the same stats and kind of stick with them unless they are trying out a different build. But there's not really many ways you can kind of pull that, if you know what I mean. A lot of the ways it would just be, you can have like discipline and mobility if you're on hunter or something, and then maybe you'll want strength. But then if you can do that multiple times for armor, I don't know what the likelihood is, and maybe it's still down to RNG, of course, but it sort of exposes this thing that I said about armor for a while. The armor's depth needs to be there needs to be more depth on armor beyond just stats, kind of thing. So I like it conceptually. I do like that kind of aspect of it. I actually quite like the idea of getting an armor set and having a way to sort of tweak it or upgrade it. But I sort of, I just don't know if it's the considering the overall armor like economy or system or whatever in the game. I don't know if it's the greatest way to do things. And then, I haven't even tried the new rocket launcher, by the way. I think I sort of spoke a couple of weeks ago that it has very questionable perks on it, generally. And what else is there? There's obviously the event pass, which I haven't bought. A lot of people are obviously, I think, seemingly not going to buy it. I'm not too sure if I am getting it or not. I'm just kind of waiting and seeing. There is a shader in it, so I already have silver on the game, so technically, like I'm not buying it because I'm not spending money specifically on that. If I do get it, but I've said this before, I actually don't hate the event pass. I would rather it be free, and I do think it should be with everything else that you get if you're buying like the annual pass edition of the expansion and stuff. But I also just don't think it's a terrible system. Like I think a lot of people are being pretty dramatic with the event pass in particular. Though I can understand locking a shader behind a paywall. As I said, I think it would be way better if the event pass was just like free to everyone. I don't think making it purchase with brightness is the right way to go either. I know that you could argue that's fine, but I'm like, if you're gonna do that, make it like 2 or 3 thousand and then chuck in the armor sets, which maybe is like total makes no sense value wise, but it's like, well, that's the thing. What are you? How much brightness are you going to charge for it? If the armor sets are 6,000, are you going to charge 6,000 dust for that? And I'm like 6,000 dust for, but that I mean that maybe is too much, but it is. You got to think about the equivalent of 1,000 silver. Well, I guess maybe it would only be like, I don't know if they do it on the silver to bright dust equivalent. I don't know. I guess if they do that, it wouldn't be too bad. But even so, you effectively have to grind out a bunch of other stuff, and bright dust is already controlled on how much you can earn. That's why I basically am stockpiling it now, because I don't want to spend much of it. I haven't even bought the Solstice. I will say I'm not sure if I'm going to buy the Solstice glow armors. I want to because I typically do, and this would be the first year I don't buy them. But I also just don't. I don't hate the armor set, but I think the glows are really weak. Like they just don't. They're not very expressive or very. I don't want them to be super over the top because I think you can. I think some previous years Solstice armor has gone a little bit over the top with them. But this one seems to have kind of been very tame, like probably the tamest we've seen kind of thing. And I don't know if that's because they just want to kind of let the armor design itself shine because they like it. I don't know, but when you're buying, when you considering the price of them, I'm like, yeah, you really don't need to charge that amount for this armor set. It's effectively the same with just a different color glow. That is pretty much like primarily seen on like the class item and helmet, and it's across other parts of the armor, but it just doesn't stand out very well. So yeah, I don't know. Solstice is. I usually like Solstice. I usually think Solstice is a cool time for Destiny. But we used to have Solstice during the summer when we would have seen the reveal of the next expansion, and it would have like been a nice kind of way to sort of celebrate and just sort of chill out in the game sort of thing. But this year we're not in that situation because obviously, as we weren't in the last year as well because of the. And I guess we also weren't the previous year, but even so, I kind of missed that like Summer of Destiny sort of vibe, and I think that sort of went well with Solstice. It's completely side note. I still have no idea why they changed the name from Solstice of Heroes to Solstice. Because I think Solstice on its own, like on trailers and stuff, like the logo for it looks really weird to me. I know that's like such a random nitpick kind of thing, but it's like Solstice of Heroes says what the event is, and we are still doing stuff essentially to celebrate that. I thought when they were changing it to Solstice, I was like, oh right, they are getting away from the themes of like black, white, and gold, and they're gonna kind of try and take it in a more of a summer event direction, with like crazy colors and get allow them to kind of like have sort of be more flexible with like designs and weapons, things like that. And they definitely did not do that. We are still very much in that core kind of thematic vibe of the obviously Eververse gets all the kind of crazy cosmetics like that, but even so, I just think that's a bit of a strange change that I don't really know why, because the event, when you talk to Eva, she still tells you about like I think honoring those in the past or something like that, and so it's a bit of a strange thing, but yeah, that is the decision they made. So yeah, I don't think there's much else I can say about Solstice. Honestly, I sort of I want to play more just to get the armor sets all upgraded and probably all the event challenges, and then maybe I'll just buy the event card just so I can get the shader. But not many people are happy with this event, and I totally get why. And yeah, I'm curious. I think a lot of people have the issue because this event doesn't feel like it's not innovating much. Events aren't innovating much on like overall kind of thing. They're very sort of stuck in one style, and it's like, I mean, I think First All the Lost is arguably the most egregious of these because of the way that they were just they took away the haunted forest, which I thought was actually alright, and then they replaced it with haunted lost sectors, which were literally just or haunted sectors, but they are literally just lost sectors dressed up in Halloween decorations, and it's not a terrible activity, but it's like this is like super underwhelming. And it's funny, I said it the year it came out, and then it wasn't until the following year I actually had people criticizing it, and I was like, I don't know why people ate this up so much, because I was sort of like, at least that's what it seemed like. I don't remember many complaints about it, because I just thought, guys, it's literally just a lost sector. Like, this is what they did. Like, at least the Bonfire Bash and the EAZ is a different level. But then even with Bonfire Bash, they've reduced the focus on the level. You know, Guardian Games doesn't have anything unique to it other than they did like the PvP, the class-based, matchmaking, which I thought was a cool idea. And obviously they've still got the strikes and stuff, but I still feel like Guardian Games could do with a bit more going on. Dawning, I think, is okay. I think it could do with an activity, but I think the core loop of, the baking cookies and things like that is a cool thing. I also think that they probably don't have much going on for Dawning, because that usually releases just after a season starts, so they probably think that because of the timing of that, they don't actually need to make a proper activity because people are still playing the new stuff. Which I sort of agree with. I just think that you could bring back Sparrow Racing, which I think would make more sense in a summer event. Or even Guardian Games, I guess, because of the sort of style and what the event's about. But yeah, I don't know. I think events are, obviously events are primarily this rate seemingly for selling FFS cosmetics and stuff, but I do think that they need to kind of like make events feel like more of a proper celebration in the game, and not rehashing the same thing every year. I'm not saying don't do that, but do stuff to kind of make it different each year, kind of thing, and not. I don't think ditching the old game mode and making something new is necessarily the right play. I don't think that's what people want necessarily. I think people were saying they wanted something different. I think, but I sort of think that I'm surprised that they were like Bonfire Bash was seen as like a better version, or like something, whether it is seen as a better version, I don't know. But they've ran with it for 3 years, and I am almost like, why don't you have both? If you might as well offer both. I guess that splits playable sort of thing, but you can do it as a test, or have it rotate every day or something, and one day it's Bonfire Bash, next day it's EAZ. I don't know how easy that is to do, but it's sort of like, again, it's like you want to have something that feels like the event's changing, really. You want to have something that's notably making you go, oh, this event feels different. It doesn't have to be something crazy. And like they said that this is something I didn't even talk about. They mentioned that they increased the enemy density and difficulty, and I'm like, I don't see it, honestly. Like, I just genuinely, I'm like, where? Like, I think I can tell that like there's more enemies, but it's also so minor that I'm just like, I know this, like, it doesn't feel like you've barely done anything at all. That's what it feels like anyway. But yeah, don't think there's much else to talk about Solstice there. I'll probably get my armor upgraded, and that'll be it pretty much. But yeah, just moving on to kind of wrap up. There's not really too much here to talk about, though it is interesting. Obviously, in terms of what else has been going on in the game, Veil Containment has obviously still been ongoing as of the 18th and the 25th of July. And they finally gave us a kind of a proper explanation about the Veil, like a proper, this is effectively what it is. I think I was still a bit confused about it, but I guess it sort of makes sense. It's the way it's described, and I think they sort of could, again, this just should have all been, a lot of this narrative should have been weaved in with the main campaign, but I think, as I said, I'll talk into more about that later, because I think, obviously, as I speculated, there's definitely much more going on with Lightfall and its development than I think most are giving it credit for. But they basically say the Veil is they say it's a web of consciousness. They sort of liken it to the Vex network, but almost like a physical manifestation of it. Chio Mercy basically says it's, organic rather than like, artificial. And we also find out, I think, the following week, I believe, that was the 18th. The Veil kind of explanation was the 18th of July, but the 25th of July was the last. That was obviously the most recent. At least that's the time of recording. It's the most recent one. Obviously, there'll be another one today. But that was the last recording, and it was basically Chioma basically saying that everyone's died and everyone's dead. And I think Maya's gone, and so obviously Chioma maybe is the only one left at this point now, in where they've got to in the story. And then I think Nimbus basically says that they can't bear to like stand any of this. They don't want to listen to it anymore, and sort of asks Osiris how many there are. And I think Osiris says 3. So it seems like we've got 3 more, which is interesting, because that means we've got 1 today, 1 next week, and 1 week after, and then the following week is the showcase and the next season. So really like lines up perfectly with that, uh, almost as if it was planned. I again, when you say you have this running for the entire season, much some people speculate that they did it in response to Lightfall. I'm like, that's not how this works. This was 100% done, and they knew. I've said this before, but I 100% believe that they were working ahead of themselves during Lightfall's development to kind of get this stuff into the game, because they had to get a story and start making it, because they had to release the expansion. So they were like, we're gonna have to kind of fix the story in post effectively, you know, and deepen it and connect it to the wider Destiny world, and then maybe we can use that as well to tease what's coming afterwards, which is also what they've hinted at in those interviews before. So yeah, 3 more for this season, and as they said that there'd be one for every Tuesday, and then they've also said that there'll be more at the start of seasons 22 and 23. Bungie have said that, and I assume that'll be tied into the quest where you'll get like the new Strand aspects that I assume will be coming. Well, I say we know we're getting new Strand aspects next season, and I'm pretty sure they've also said that they are coming the season afterwards as well. So it would make sense, as it was tied into this season's quest for that. We'll get into that. It'll be curious if I am curious if we're going to get a new weapon with any of those, but we'll see. Yeah, so I don't know if there's much to talk about. I don't know. They've said that when I say, that Bungie have said that they've said there'll be more at the start of the next 2 seasons. I'm not sure if that's just the first week, or if there's maybe 2 or 3 in a week, and then that's it. But I assume that there'll be at least a bit kind of thing, and they've also said that some of these are going to hint at what's to come, and maybe that's what we'll get now. Sorry, now as in today, the next 3 weeks, that could be some of that. But it seems like we're going to have at least 5 left, 3 for the rest of the season, 1 at the beginning, at the first week of next season, and then 1 of the season afterwards. So yeah, I don't think there's too much to say here, but I actually really do like this. I like this delivery method. They actually did mention, which I didn't even write up about in this, but they basically kind of gave like a deep dive into like the explanation and behind the scenes, how they put this together and all that. And they did sort of say that they wanted to keep it hidden kind of from players. They wanted it to be kind of like more like a bit of a secret for you to find, but they kind of went too far in that. Which I agree with. I think it's one of those where it's like, this would have been way better as a secret if it was something that the community had to find every week kind of thing. That's what I think would have been exciting, if it was like different places within Neo Moon, and every week it was like a different location or something, which I think would be, maybe that'd be crazy, but that would be like a proper sense of discovery sort of thing. And then you could kind of you could alert everyone when they log into the game that like, oh, there's something, but having it be hidden off the side of the map, basically, off the side of the screen, at the icon for the Veil Containment, and you load in and you just hold square or hold whatever button. It's I don't hate it. I still think it's cool. I am actually looking forward to these. I think these Veil Containment messages have actually been some of the best writing in Destiny since Witch Queen, to be honest. It's obviously character development, but it's also character development, but it's also story. And I think in terms of story, it's the best we've gotten, kind of thing. They've continued good character development over the last year or two, but since Witch Queen. But I don't think the story has been particularly amazing. But all of the character interactions and kind of development and kind of backstory and getting humanizing them and everything has been great. And then I think this storyline with Chiomesi and Maya Sundaresh is really cool. And I do think there's like an element of like almost like a detective nature to it, where we're sort of finding out, what are we going to learn this week. And I think there's something really fascinating about that, and so I do think that they should keep doing this kind of thing. I just don't know if that's something that they've said this, because that's another thing, is obviously Bungie said it was like an experiment, and a lot of people have like ran off with that quote and saying like, oh, what, you're experimenting in the last year before your final expansion, that's not the time for that. And people are saying, oh, this experiment didn't pay off, and I'm like, I don't think it's an experiment. Like, I think it is an experiment, but it's kind of like, it's the easiest way they could squeeze into the game without making content, because the content that it would have gone with was Lightfall, but they didn't have everything ready for then, so they had to move on. And I think that's the thing, this narrative team has had to kind of work ahead. And I don't know who wrote the story of Lightfall, but it's sort of like, I don't know if it was a different team, and then this team's having to go back and fill it in. I don't really know. But I just think they're only calling it an experiment because it probably is an experiment, I guess, technically, but it's not like it was always planned as an experiment. I don't think, again, Lightfall was never planned in this way. Like, it's a whole thing, honestly. But I don't really think there's much else to talk about with the Veil Containment. I think that's pretty much it. As I said, we'll regroup, we'll recoup. I don't know. We'll say whatever. We'll talk about what goes on in the next couple of weeks. And then maybe there'll be some cool, interesting stuff. It might tie into the showcase. It might tie into Final Shape. It might tie into what's coming beyond. They've sort of hinted that they will. I don't know if that will be this season that we'll get something like that, or if they'll wait until we've had the showcase and everything like that. But yeah, we'll see. So that's pretty much it for what's going on in the game. I say it's not too much. I say it's not too much. I probably spoke more about what's going on in the game this week than I did last week, or not last week, 2 weeks ago. Sorry. But now let's get into kind of the meat of this show, which hopefully won't take too long to read because it's like half of it, and I'm already like 45 minutes in. I think approximately. But the first thing is that there was a leak, as is typical with Bungie. Typically, I mean, I say typical. Lightfall, it's interesting. Lightfall didn't leak. The strand stuff kind of leaked, I think, but not much about what Lightfall was about, as far as I know. I could be wrong. But we have another leak. Oh no, sorry, no. Strand did leak in. Sorry, of course, that was it. The leak for Strand, the leak for Lightfall was Strand, and of course it was leaked in the exact same way that this has been. I don't know why I went off on another tangent there. Really, I was sort of like off on another. I was thinking that it had leaked, like, for example, like when Witch Queen leaked, there was a bunch of information and like art that came out for Witch Queen before it was like revealed. So I kind of knew going in that like it could have been that, and it's everything lined up with everything with that. And yeah, pretty much the same has happened here, but not so much in like a leak with art and stuff. Like Lightfall was a leak with this a Bungie dev on their ArtStation page had put up like, I think, a finisher animation that they had made, and it showed that they had like green on their like subclass icons, or like their ability icons and stuff, with like new icons, and then they got, I think, taken down. And then yeah, just recently on the Destiny 2 Leaks Reddit, or subreddit, sorry, basically an account that I believe is now deleted posted something saying like, oh, my friend sent me this, and it was basically a very similar looking like showcase for an animation, specifically showcasing this transmat effect. This like player loads in and it shows it from different angles and loading in, but the first time they load in, I believe it shows them sort of like, it shows first person very briefly, and you get to see a new icon, and you get to see 2 melees. And by the way, I should say this as a spoiler. I mean, I guess it's sort of, I say it's a spoiler, but it's already out there, people already know. But it was, yeah, you had this new icon, I think it was a new, I'm not sure if the icons for the abilities in terms of grenade, melee, and class ability, I think they were all the same. They were playing on Warlock, by the way. But it showed a second melee charge, and it had the color red on it. So it seems like it was a very convincing video. It, of course, could be fake, but it was really convincing, and a lot of people picked it up, and Bungie haven't said anything, and the account was deleted. You can see that either way. They deleted it because it was fake. They deleted it because Bungie were like, oh shit, let's delete that, let's get it gone. I don't, some people believe maybe Bungie leaked it themselves because of the community sentiment being so low. I've heard that the devs don't do that. Personally, like, I'm sure I've heard from like probably people I would trust more than random people in the community, that I've heard that generally devs don't leak their games because that's just not, like, they wouldn't do that because they also have, they can, I think, get in trouble themselves, I think. But at the same time, I also see the logic behind why they would leak something, and I feel like that's sort of possible, that to kind of get something out there, get people talking. But at the same time, I believe it was Aztecross that said this in his video about it, or maybe it was Fallout Plays, I'm not sure, but one of them, or someone on YouTube I watched, said that they're not a huge fan if this was Bungie because you kind of lead people astray. You get people thinking, people start setting expectations for what it could be, and they start speculating, and they spend a long time thinking about it. And because they spend a long time thinking about it, if what they come up with doesn't match up with what's, revealed, that can cause like, a negative reaction because people don't think it's as good as what they thought, because they like their idea and stuff like that. And I think that's a really good point, because you do, when you leak your, if that was true, that Bungie were leaking their own stuff, then you run into the same issue. You run into that issue, sorry, because of, you just don't know what people are going to react. You don't know what people are going to speculate on, and I think it has a chance to backfire. But I also think Bungie also do a great job with reveals anyway, so they'll probably be fine. But yeah, I didn't really say too much. Obviously, it's red. There's 2 melees on this Warlock. But it also, the new super icon there, or it looks kind of like a Well of Radiance sword, but it's definitely different. I'm just trying to give you an idea for like the general shape of it and how it looks. And yeah, it looks like a Well of Radiance sword, but obviously I'm assuming it's not because it's red. But let's just, if we just sort of talk about this, assuming it is real. As I said, I'm not really sure if myself if Bungie would have leaked this. I totally get the logic. I just don't know if that's really likely. I mean, it sounds like it sounds logical, but I'm not certainly going to deny it or say it's a terrible idea. I just don't know if, as I said, I've heard that that's not what the devs wouldn't leak their own stuff, but I'm not saying it's never happened before, because I'm sure it most certainly has. It's just whether or not it's. I guess that's the thing, is whether it's done as a company decision or whether it's done as a dev is doing it. So you can look at it 2 different ways there. It's not so much Bungie leaking it. Maybe it was a dev that did it or something, or someone somehow, I don't know. It's all over. Honestly, it was like the leaks we had a few months ago. It was kind of like, we don't know how it kind of got out, and very sort of messy situation. But yeah, let's just, if we assume it's real, I'm actually really surprised that we're getting another subclass. Especially when we just got Strand. I'm hoping that if if it is real, that it doesn't mess with Final Shape's story, kind of, because I feel like Strand sort of did. And of course, I hope it is balanced well, because it has been a short time. The one thing that's interesting that I will get into at the end of the show, in a bit of a rant, deep dive, whatever, is that I do find it interesting that that they mentioned. I forgot this, but Joe Blackburn mentioned in an interview. I'm pretty sure it's Joe Blackburn, being obviously game director of Destiny 2. He said that they had a new damage type or subclass in development, and he told us that during, like, before Witch Queen was out. Like, we knew it was after Witch Queen got announced or revealed, and it was before it released. And he obviously said, "Oh, it's not coming with Witch Queen," and that's interesting because there were leaks and a lot of the sort of aesthetic of Witch Queen and the green, obviously, and also the with all of the webs and the strings do kind of fit well with Strand, really. And from my understanding, I'm pretty sure the super icon on the Warlock is on the chest piece of the Warlock's armor of the Throne World, which is super fascinating, because it's like so seemingly like this was, maybe it was originally, you can almost like glean from that it was very originally, intended for that, which I find intriguing, because obviously then it came with Lightfall, and then we got one with Beyond Light, which is before Witch Queen, and then if we're getting another one with Final Shape, that also makes you look at the sort of schedule that they announced. When they announced 3 expansions, it was like, was that their original plan, was to have a new expansion, a new subclass per expansion? And then it makes me go, did they really delay Lightfall so that they could did they add on Final Shape and then change all the structure because they wanted Strand to ship, because they wanted to ship like 3 subclasses? And maybe someone would be like, "Oh, that's silly. They wouldn't delay an expansion. They wouldn't. They wouldn't like add on other. They wouldn't do all this just for a single subclass." But you've got to think about it, right? If you want to make 3 subclasses, where are you going to fit them all in? You're not just going to delay an expansion by a year or 2, because that's the thing. It's very much like their mindset, much like Justin Truman spoke about in that GDC talk. It's the getting away from the box model. Was it the box product mindset, and getting to the live service mindset, or like to do with the train station kind of mindset, about you can't hold one train up, because if you hold one train up, the other trains get slowed or stuck or delayed as well. So you have to just get it out there, kind of thing. And so if you think about that from that point of view, it's like their whole thing was, it was like, well, we want to make sure we're shipping 3 subclasses, or we want to tell this story, but we can't do this unless we actually, we sort this out. So let's add on another expansion. Let's kind of deepen the story, expand where it's going to go. Um, in Lightfall's case, we'll fix it in post. Lightfall can have Strand. Witch Queen can just be focused heavily on the story, getting that into gear. And we'll update the old subclasses as well. So we're still working on subclasses, and we're kind of bringing up everything to parity. And then when we get to Lightfall, that can be Strand, and then we'll fix the story in post. Whether or not, I don't know if that was a plan, but it's like, well, again, it's weird how the post story for Lightfall is really good, but the story of Lightfall wasn't good. Again, like I said, it's something else must have happened there, because that just doesn't make sense to me, and so and then obviously, and then they're like, then they can have final shape hopefully release unscathed, because they've kind of fixed all of the lead up to it. They've kind of set up, again, when I spoke before about these filler seasons, then you've kind of, we're now at the point you're gonna have the D2 showcase, you're gonna have final shape reveal, and the season that launches then, the following season, should be a lot better, because they're back to the seasons that were originally planned, much like Season of the Risen was probably always planned for Witch Queen, or to go alongside Witch Queen. And I think Season of the Seraph was probably always planned. And they just had to remove the story, and I'm sure that there will be a knock-on effect as a result of that. And that's seen quite well, because you look at this season was kind of slow, and then suddenly picks up the story right at the end, which paves its way perfectly for where we're going next in the story, which makes the story-wise the next season sound really interesting. And then it's like, well, how are they going to end the year? And I think that it's all coming together, and I think that a lot of the the low community sentiment is going to be fixed after the Final Shape showcase, or Destiny showcase. But I think there's more to that as well. There's a lot more I've got to say on that, so I won't get into that too much here, because I'm getting to that at the end. So we'll leave that now for the subclass. Not really too much else to talk about. Very intriguing though. I am excited, honestly. I've been thinking about this. I've been like, I'm actually really amped to get a new subclass. I really hope this is real, because, like, to me, it's like, if it's not real, Bungie should just come out and told us it's not real. That's my thing. If we get to the showcase and we don't see a new subclass, I'm gonna be disappointed, because I know that's like, you shouldn't, because it's always a leak, but it's like, but surely, for example, when the previous leaks came out before, they basically told us that they were going to go out and sort out this thing, and they were aware of it. They didn't confirm or deny, and all of those previous leaks were real. And this leak spread so fast that, like, I don't think they would choose to not say anything. I feel like if it wasn't real, but then maybe they don't want to be fair. It could be a case of not saying anything because they know that it's not a thing. And they would just wait until the showcase reveal, so that then they can kind of like wow everyone with everything else. But I also think it's better to get expectations out of the way at the same time. Like, if everyone's expecting a subclass and then it doesn't have a subclass, then I think that's why you should get out in front of it, and they've got plenty of time to do that. So, but we will see. So yeah, moving on again, sort of sticking on this topic of final shape. We found out the expansion, its code name is Warp, and which would be interesting to know what that means. I was actually meant to write down, there were other code names for the previous expansions, but never mind. But we saw that someone from within the orchestra, or a composer, posted. Well, there's two things. There was one, posted a picture of the music they were kind of playing, and they kind of like scribbled out some stuff, but it showed Paul McCartney's name on it. And then from someone else, they also posted a video, and actually they were playing like in this orchestra, and we didn't get to obviously hear the full scope of the piece of music, but we got to hear a bit of it. That tweet's now deleted. I won't name who it is. I don't want to stir up more stuff, but I saw that, and it was really interesting. Again, they also posted pictures where we could see that they were, that showed it was for codename Warp or whatever. And yeah, it was the sort of post about the Paul McCartney sort of music. Oh, sorry, Paul McCartney being involved. We don't know if this is him directly involved with Final Shape, or if this is like some of his composed music for Destiny 1 that's maybe going to get remixed or brought back. But his name being there, to me, shouts like big nostalgia. This to me, it just screams, I'm like, they know what they're doing. And you will have noticed this if you go back and watch the Final Shape reveal, like, teaser with Cade in it. you can, I think, hear the music in that a little bit. I don't know if that's new music, but if you listen right at the end when they show off like the PlayStation crossover armor sets, they play like Destiny 1 music. And to me, that's a sign. And they even did it when they showed off Marathon and they revealed that and they transitioned to Destiny. There was kind of that like almost like airy, very ambient music that's very Destiny 1 that they also play kind of in that transition, like as because like the Marathon trailer ends and they show Bungie's logo, and then it kind of like transitions to like the Destiny version of the Bungie logo, and then has like that music, and then sort of fades to black, and then cuts into the final shape teaser. So I think to me this is like very much saying that it's going to be heavy nostalgia, and it's so funny to me. I mean, people have said this before. It was like, oh, when Bungie need Cade, like that's when Bungie need the sort of what do you call it, like the sort of the marketing, I guess. They know what to do, and it's like first, like Destiny needed it with Forsaken, and Cade suddenly shows up, and Destiny kind of, I think, does need it now, and oh look, Cade's back, it's really funny. And so I'll get into this more later a bit more, but I'm honestly, I'm very curious to know the music. I mean, the music is always good. Like the Destiny music is just always, as far as I'm concerned, some of the best music in gaming. Like it's just, and people say that about Halo, and so I have heard a bit of Halo music, and I do want to go back and play Halo and listen to it and stuff. So that is something that I'll do at some point. I think I want to anyway. I want to play Halo. I'll probably just play them on Game Pass or whatever. But yeah, there's not too much to talk about there, but very cool. Looking forward to the music, and again, looking forward to the showcase. We're 3 weeks away. It feels like this showcase has felt like such a long time coming. It's like it feels so far away, and they always do, but like this year especially has been difficult because we were sort of looking. Well, I mean, they kind of announced it so early on this time as well because of the final shape reveal back in May, along with Marathon, the PlayStation showcase. So yeah, we'll see. Looking forward to it though. So yeah, moving on, we've got another sort of leak. Leak, and then there's some sort of discussion. People are speculating what raid is coming back next season. And typically we've been getting Destiny 1 raids. We've had Vault of Glass in the year of Beyond Light. We've had King's Fall in the year of Witch Queen. And then for Lightfall, we obviously don't currently know. We know it's going to be launching on September 1st, which I should have checked this before because when I saw this, I was pretty confident. As far as I remember, raids that have launched in seasons have launched the week of the season launch. I'm pretty sure it did with Plunder, and I'm pretty certain it did with Season of the Splicer with Vault of Glass. I could be wrong, but this time it's the week after. And maybe I am just wrong, but typically that happens with new game with new expansion releases. The expansion comes out on the Tuesday, and the raid is until the following week on the Friday. Whereas here they're doing it the week after. Sorry, let me back up. In seasons, it's usually, I'm pretty certain, the Friday of so like the season comes out on the Tuesday, and then that week on the Friday the raid will come out. But then this time they're doing it on the following Friday, which makes me wonder, are they going to have trials on the first week, which seems to be their new sort of approach, and we know there's going to be a new map. It sounds like we're going to get some PvP news soon as well, based on the Twitch TWAB from a couple of weeks ago, or last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't even know when it was now. So yeah, I don't know, but I'll be curious. Maybe that's what they want to do. Maybe they want to try and have trials on the new map or something like that. So I didn't even think about that until now. But that'll be interesting to sort of see if there's anything behind that. But in terms of the actual raid, obviously a lot of people want Wrath of the Machine. I feel like that was just an obvious choice that they should have gone for, and I don't know why. If they don't go for Wrath, which it appears based on certain leaks, people have kind of confirmed that it's not Wrath. It's supposedly, it's certainly something else. There's been speculation about Leviathan or Scourge of the Past, which are Destiny 2 raids. Now Bungie have set the expectation that there are Destiny 1 raids coming back, and they did tell us that what was it? In an interview, I think they didn't specifically state Destiny 2, and they've been calling it a reprised raid, and they've not actually said Destiny 2 specifically. Oh, sorry, Destiny 1. Which is to me concerning because they've set the expectation that it would be a Destiny 1 raid, so to suddenly change it to Destiny 2 is a weird thing. Plus, Destiny 2 content was already in the game, and then they took it out, so to bring it back and act like it's the year's big reprised raid, I don't think it's a good approach, and I think that would kind of it piss people off, honestly. Because I've already seen some people being like, like, oh yeah, it's annoying, but at least we're getting it back, kind of thing. Like if it was Leviathan or Scourge, it's like, no, that's not the point. It should be additive because they set the standard. The Destiny content vault would be a way to bring back content, and they said that we're going to be reprising Destiny 1 raids. They've done Destiny 1 raids 2 years in a row, and there are still two Destiny 1 raids not in Destiny 2. So from the player's perspective, how can you? Everyone's just been because there's been speculation about Crota. Everyone's been like, oh well, Crota's a small raid. Are they going to bring it back as a dungeon? That was taken as some sort of feedback that obviously that's just feedback from the community managers that they sort of picked up. But it's like I kind of just think the only other obvious choice was Wrath of the Machine, and Bungie have kind of made it seem clear that they're kind of not going. They're not going to. It seems like they're done with Siva, but then they keep fucking dropping stuff about Siva in the game, and this Veil Containment stuff has mentioned Siva as well again, and it's like, Bungie, if you're gonna stop talking about Siva, stop talking about Siva, but you're not. You keep weaving it in and out of the story now and again when you want. So clearly it's a thing you're embodying in your story, and I'm sort of like, I think it comes from a place that they don't want to carry it on, but then they find ways that they can fit it in, so they kind of add it in, but then they're also not trying to make another story of it, kind of thing. But another thing they said a while back was that if they ever bring back a raid that already has its exotic weapon in the game, that they would make a new exotic weapon for that raid, rather than just taking the existing one and putting it in there, which I thought was really cool. And what's the only Destiny 1 raid that hasn't come back that has that with it? Wrath of the Machine, because we got Outbreak perfected back in 0 Hour and Season of the Drifter, I think, in year 2. And so everyone was like, oh, so Wrath of the Machine's coming back. But then people have also been like, but maybe it's Leviathan, because they haven't clarified the Destiny 1, whether it's Destiny 1 raid or not. I feel like that would have been, again, good to clarify, but, why give any clarification at all, really? But that just kind of bothers me. I'm just like, you should give this clarification. I'm just looking at the blog post now that they say, to, I guess, to give some news on it. They said, obviously, the upcoming raid will go live on Friday, September 1st, 2023. A few things to keep in mind, just like when King's Fall and Fall of Glass returned. And they say contest mode will be enabled for 48 hours. This is all quoting from the most recent This Week in Destiny blog post, by the way. They say clearing the raid with contest mode active is the first step to access challenge mode in the Director and the Secret Triumph. Completing the Secret Triumph, which consists of a curated list of challenges that must be completed in challenge mode, will be how a fire team can snag the world first title and get that sweet, sweet belt. To enforce the Triumph requirements in challenge mode, your fire team will wipe if you fail the success conditions during any encounter. But again, they say, just like when King's Fall or Glass returned, but then in the previous sort of sentence, they're saying, although the name of the raid is still under wraps, and obviously that's fair, but it's like, but is it a Destiny 1 raid? Is it a Destiny 1? Just I don't know why they didn't say it. And I think a lot of people now, as leaks have pointed to, that it is Crota's End that is actually coming back. And that's really interesting to me. I'm looking forward to it. I'm low-key hoping they'll keep it so that you can solo it as well. I think that would be, I don't know what to call it, but to keep in the sort of solo ability of the raid, I think would be really cool, almost like being like, oh, it's the first first official solo raid or whatever. And I think that's just you're almost honoring its history, if you know what I mean. When we, I talk about, well, I was talking the other day about Dead Space and about how you kind of you remake a game and you keep the essence of what made it. And obviously the solo ability for Crota's End was not what made it, but that certainly was an aspect to it that people liked, and I personally did it, and it was really fun. It was cool to have that experience and take on something that probably shouldn't be doable, but yet you could do it. And I just think it'd be really cool for them to kind of take a stab at it again, and or like not take a stab at it, but like actually implement it as like an intended like thing you can do, and then have like a challenge or an emblem behind it. I think that'd be cool, and obviously it wouldn't be a standard, but I just think as a unique one-off, I think that would just be cool from a design perspective to kind of get to kind of bring that element back to players. But yeah, and obviously Leviathan, a lot of people have sort of speculated on because it's been sort of said that because Leviathan was already brought back, they can just they've already made it, and it's like I don't think it works like that, because sure they've made it in this new engine or new lighting engine or whatever it is. I don't actually think it's not like a new engine obviously, but it's like I think it's obviously an updated engine, but the updated engine was more to do with the workflow and the way that they build the game more than it is. Well, I guess it I don't know if it allows them to build content quicker, or if it's just the fact they can build content quicker and get like put it into playtesting and kind of like test it all out quicker. But I almost think that I think it was a lot of the lighting, because when they first brought out Beyond Light, they went back and updated the lighting for the EDZ and Nessus, and I wonder if like that's when I think that's what I heard the words like lighting engine, but I don't know if that's the right terminology or phrase. But to me, I don't think it's as simple as saying, oh well, they've already brought back Leviathan, so like they can just use that. And it's like, yeah, sure, they've got the spaces back, but it's covered in egregore, and the lighting's totally different, and they've still obviously got a bunch of it to build. So it's almost like, yeah, you're saving yourself a bit of time, but you're still gonna have to go in, remove all that, change the lighting, update the enemy combatants because they're not the same as they used to be. So I don't quite think it's going to work that way, and I actually think it would be really surprising and a bit tone deaf if they brought back Leviathan, even though it would be cool to have it back in the game. I just don't. And some people said about because you can see Leviathan on the moon, but it's like, but the dungeon's still there as well. I thought that Leviathan was going to disappear as well. I'm almost like, if the dungeon's still there and Leviathan is still in the sky, why can't we still patrol it? Why not? Like, I don't understand why they didn't keep that in the game. I just think that would have been a cool little thing you could have done on the side. It's effectively an extra patrol zone. And I thought that was a cool way to bring it back. I just don't think that they would do that and then be like, oh yeah, and now it's coming back as a raid. Unless they were changing it to be like an egregore focused version of the raid. Maybe they would keep that and it was like a different vibe. Maybe it's more like a horror style raid. Kind of taking what they did in Season of the Haunted and kind of implementing that into Leviathan as a raid on the whole, which I think that would be interesting. We also, in the patrol version of Leviathan, we actually never got to go on the sort of deck and the outside of the ship. So yeah, who knows? But if it's Crota, I'm very happy with that. I think Crota's a great raid, and I think that'd be really cool to see. I'm actually very excited to see what that's going to look like in Destiny 2, because there was some really amazing scenery in that raid. Same with Wrath of the Machine though as well. Like, I'd love Wrath of the Machine update. I really feel like Bungie's got to just bring it back. I'm sorry, but like, I know if they want to get away from Siva, then stop putting in the story, as I said. But it's also like, that raid is just really fun, and a lot of people like it. Like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand the aversion. Like, I mean, some people were like, oh, because they had to like redesign all of the combatants kind of thing, and it's like, yeah, I guess, but like, I don't know what the work is like between updating Destiny 1 to 2 and reprising Destiny 2 from like pre-engine upgrade to post-engine upgrade. I don't really know, but I don't know. But yeah, we'll see. I do hope Wrath of the Machine comes back eventually. I think next year would be a great time to bring it back, actually, especially with the 10th anniversary of Destiny. That would be a very good, like, I mean, I know Vault of Glass probably makes more sense for that in a way, but I think Wrath of the Machine was probably the most celebrated raid post Destiny, like post Destiny launch, and we've got Vault of Glass back, we've got King's Fall, and if we get Crota's End back, I'm like, just complete them, just add in Wrath, just do it, like, bring it back. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the future leaks and theories and stuff like that. I should have mentioned as well that there was I believe there was Destiny Bulletin on Twitter. They posted as well that they've heard that it's Crota's End coming back. So I do think there's some fairly good sort of reliability there. But for now, let's move on. We're going to talk about some actual news from Bungie, not from speculative nature and leaks and all shit like that. We're actually going to jump into actual news. So let's get into that. So we're kind of like, sure, the order here is going to get a bit sort of shaken up, sort of for the sake of flow. But they basically released a blog post that discussed some economy and ritual weapon and sort of vendor changes that are coming in Season 22. And I'll sort of get into the weapons side a bit later, or a bit after this. But first, we're going to talk about the economy size, which is obviously created, on the economy side, sorry, which has obviously created much contention within the Destiny community. So effectively, they are tripling the stack sizes for Ascendant Shards and Ascendant Alloys, and they're doubling the Enhancement Prism stack sizes. So, Ascendant Shards, you're going to be able to go from holding 10 to 30 in Season 22. This is all coming in Season 22, August 22nd. Ascendant Alloys, you'll be able to go from holding 10 to 30, and Enhancement Prisms, you'll be able to go from holding 50 to 100. Bungie give a bit of a sort of insight to this, and so they say, quote, "A big reason we are making this change is to remove the risk of losing these materials at the postmaster. Now that the caps have been increased, we are removing the ability for these items to go to the postmaster. If players already have full stacks of any of these materials in their inventory, moving forward, these will behave like Glimmer, and the player won't receive any more of the items until they are below the cap," end quote. They will also they note that, not many people are going to be affected by this. And they do, I should just say that they mention that whilst your materials won't go there anymore, anything you currently have will stay there. But in terms of the sort of data behind it, they say, quote, "Before making this update, we looked at the total number of players that will be affected by this particular change, and it turns out that less than 1% hold more than the new increased caps of these materials at their postmaster. In other words, 99% of the player base will benefit from having higher inventory caps," end quote. And obviously they're saying that because I'm guessing they knew that people would suddenly have a problem because the amount that they were giving. It seems like they want to kind of cut caps down a little bit. But that's obviously what's caused so much controversy, because people don't like currency caps. And I just think that there's something... People don't... I don't understand why people get so annoyed over this. I understand... I understand it from a certain point of view. I do. But... effectively, the controversy is that the stack sizes... or the stack sizes will be technically less than what you can hold right now. In the sense that right now... you can have 10... So you have 10 on in your inventory, which is account-wide. And then you can have 10... If we're talking about shards, and specifically shards or alloys, you can have 10 in your inventory, which is for your account overall, and then you can have 10 per character's postmaster. And then for Prism, so let me back up. So the overall total right now is technically 40, because you can have 10 in each postmaster and 10 on your character's inventory, but you can't actually physically hold more than 10. You can only hold, you log to 10, and then you would have to spend some to be able to pick up those other ones. And to be fair, any more you earn after that cap, any more you've earned, if you've got 10 in your inventory and 10 in the postmaster, you won't earn any more. You'll lose them. Which I'm surprised people don't have an issue with, actually. I'm surprised that hasn't come up. Maybe they have, but I don't know. And then, of course, with Prisms, technically the max is 200, and the max next season will be 100. Essentially, to get the 200 right now, it's 50 per account inventory, and then it's an extra 50 per character's postmaster. So again, 200 overall, and then it'll be 100. So it's a bit of a weird thing. I understand to an extent why people get annoyed over this, but I'm sure I saw someone say something along the lines of oh, you don't need to balance the economy because games aren't actually real economies. But I believe that to be fundamentally wrong, because of course you can have inflation in a game, and it can cause problems if you let people run away. And interestingly, the director of Diablo 4, Joe Shelley, mentioned in an interview with Paul Tassi over at Forbes a few weeks ago, he was referring, because he got asked about why certain items are so rare. And he effectively said that the thing is, if you start off, if you make something have a high drop rate first, then you effectively ruin its chance to be rare at any point in the future. And obviously we're not, in terms of Destiny, we're not talking about the rarity of these currencies, but you have to stop people basically running rampant with these. Otherwise you can't properly design a system without having to consider a really wide margin of players and different positions. Now, some might not think that's a problem, but ultimately, you know, the ones who have a lot are probably the ones that are going to stick around, the most amount of time playing the game, and who probably will be able to easily get them back anyway. But you can't design the game around those, otherwise you then screw up the design of other aspects of the game. Basically meaning that you can't create you don't want to create an imbalance where some players have a ton of a currency and other players don't, and then you have to account for both because you want to design a game a certain way. And sure, some might say, well, what's the problem? I've put in the hours, I should do it. But it's like, yeah, but you're choosing to put in the hours. It's not intended to be that way. It's not intended that you're going to grind out this currency and be able to like stockpile yourself for life, essentially. And I guess, yeah, you should be. Maybe you should, but then the problem is that those are the people that also need the content the most. So Bungie can't design around only those players, but at the same time, they would have to do that if they wanted to, and that's why certain things I think have such a steep legendary shard cost, because legendary shards ever since the game came out just flew out of control, and people have 30, 40, 50,000 of them. I spent a bunch of money at the end of the first year because I didn't want it to be too easy for myself, and that never really proved to be worth it. I don't think. I actually hindered myself more than anything. And yeah, so that's what I think Bungie are trying to do. They're trying to force those players to spend more, but then if you try and do that and you do it too often, then too many other players that are behind are going to feel like they're lagging even further behind. And so a cap allows that amount to be controlled, even if it's not the most elegant solution. I will say, though, it is weird that Bungie have put these caps lower than where they currently are, because you'd have thought if that was a problem right now, they would have already addressed it, and they don't. But they do mention at the end of this blog post, which encompasses a couple of weapon changes and ritual changes. So of course that some of what they're saying here may relate to that. But I'll get into those in a minute. But they say, quote, "The changes announced today are a precursor to some larger economy changes that we will reveal in the near future. Our goal is to keep Destiny 2's economy in a healthy state and avoid any possibility of currency's inflation. That's the reason we regularly examine storage limits and costs, adjusting them in some cases, like we did in early 2023 with Iron Banner, Trials of Osiris, Crucible, and Gambit," end quote. And so it's possible that some of these tie into, it sounds like they are going to tie into, a bigger, some bigger stuff. I don't know if that means, because they say near future, I don't know if that means Season 22 that's coming, or maybe that's something that's going to be a Destiny 2 showcase future-looking thing. I still have the prediction that armour is going to get a big overhaul, and I think maybe this could be a precursor to that a little bit, but we'll see. I don't know if that really counts as economy, because that's, on the different end, but I mean, it will tie into the economy, I guess, because of cost and things like that. But yeah, this cap allows them to put a more definitive definitive cap, definitive end to how many you can earn than they have done before. And so that could be a sign that they're planning to use them more. It could be a sign that they're wanting you to earn them more. It could be a sign that they're actually improving. They might be increasing how many you get, how often you get them, because they want it to be, better. We don't really know. And I know people complaining when Bungie... This isn't one of those situations that... So I remember before, they announced, like, with weapons, that when you masterwork them, they wouldn't generate orbs or multi-kills. And then they announced later that that's because we're adding something else there. That's a situation I'm like, yeah, why didn't you tell us that when you said this? But this situation, I'm like, I don't think Bungie... They've already hinted at there's going to be some economy changes. I don't know what that could be. It might not be anything. But I don't really see why... Like, they don't need to, like, give us a massive reasoning as to why, like, oh, we're doing this because we actually got this other thing coming. I don't think that's needed here, really. But yeah, to me, I just don't... This is like such a non-issue to me. And it's a little bit crazy to see how many people got annoyed over this. Like this is one of the situations where I'm like, this is people overreacting. This, when we talk about that article that I spoke about in the last episode, that was saying, oh, Destiny 2 isn't the problem, its players are. This is kind of a situation where I'm like, that's kind of like I'm not saying people can't have opinions, of course. Like, again, express what you want, but like, I don't see why people get so upset over caps like this. I know it's a cap, and it's like, oh, effectively, it's preventing how much progress you can make, but people don't seem to understand fundamentals of game design. They're like, but that has to happen. Like, if you've hit the cap, that's like a success. That's like a miniature like goal or not challenge, but like that's like a miniature accomplishment in itself, kind of thing. Like you've got enough that you can hold as many as that. And if you don't want to do it anymore, then or if you don't want to, you have to keep spending them, I guess. But I don't know. I just this is the kind of thing that I'm just like I don't really have too many thoughts on it. I just thought it was kind of like, oh, this is cool, yeah. And yeah, sure, it's lower than, it's going from 40 to 30 on shards and alloys, and it's going from 200 to 100 effectively on prisms, but it's also like, but your postmaster isn't a proper place to store them. Again, yeah, sure, we can argue, we can say it's weird, as I said a minute ago, it's weird why they couldn't have the caps be 40, 40, and 200, but it's like, well, 200 is quite a lot. I think that's double what this is. I think 40 would have been just like, yeah, you might as well. I don't understand why not, really. But again, maybe there's more to it, as they sort of do say that there is, and maybe that more's not going to change anything, I don't know, but I don't know. As I said, it feels like a non-issue to me. But moving on, now, I think technically, I think in the order this is actually before those economy changes, but I'm tying this into the new hand cannon archetype they talk about in the Twitch TWAB, so we'll get to that in a minute. But they basically detail some weapon additions to players' activities, and as well as some changes coming to their respective vendors and activities. And they start off by talking about those changes. And so the first is that they're increasing the likelihood that ritual engrams will drop upon completion of activities. They say specifically, quote, through examination of player feedback, we know the cadence of drops for recently added weapons in these activities is sometimes inconsistent. We want to play with the new toys when they are available, and that's what we're aiming for with these improvements. So, starting with Season 22, players will be more likely to receive ritual engrams upon completion of activities within ritual playlists, end quote. Now, to be fair, when I wrote this, I thought they were referring to ritual engrams as like when you complete activities, you get like the seasonal engrams kind of thing that drop. You get the drop, but it adds to like your total at the vendor. But I think what they mean is that they're on about the new weapons that are being added, that they're increasing the drops. And I don't know, they say it's inconsistent. That's been an issue of mine. Like I not so much the inconsistency, that actually they drop too often. I actually don't like that we get the new weapons super easy. And when they say that, the following point is almost like, sounds like they're doing, now I think about it, it's almost like, well, you're doing too much at once now. Why do both? And so they basically say that when those new weapons are added, they're going to allow them to be focused. You can focus those weapons, focus engrams on those weapons in the same season. Whereas previously, or right now, you have to wait until the following season until it becomes focusable. And they say, quote, rather than having to wait for the next season, new ritual weapons will be able to be focused on their respective vendors starting as soon as they are added to the game. We want players to have a greater agency in the rewards that they are chasing, and reassured that time spent within these activities yields exciting rewards, even if getting an unexpected god roll after a crucible match is a nice surprise, end quote. And I guess it's fine, but I just sort of like, why you're improving the drop rate and then you're also making it so you can focus them in the same season. I'd rather you make it focusable in the same season and keep the drop rate the same, or have it be like a guarantee 1 every 3 or something like that, or 1 every 2. I don't know, but like it just seems a bit too much. Like when I play Crucible, I get one nearly every single match. When I play Strikes, I get them nearly every match or two, every strike or two, and I don't quite, feels like it's overdoing that change, I think. Unless they, because I thought when they meant, oh, they're making it so you can get ritual engrams, like I said, that add to your vendor count, I thought they were saying that, and I was like, oh, cool, that makes sense. And then I guess that would tie into that second point, but I guess doing both of those at the same time is a bit of a weird thing to do. I'm not sure I'm on board with that. A lot of people will be on board, but I think a lot of people are also just like, yeah, it's easier to get, and one thing that you might know about me, or you'll learn about me, is that I'm very against making things like easier to get, in terms of rarity. I like when things are rare. I like when there's something in the game that makes you chase. I know it's a ritual weapon, like it's like fucking, like, it's not, you're not gonna want to, like, you don't need that to be rare, of course not, no, but I feel like you've got to have more rarity in Destiny, surely. Like, there's so easy to get so many things now. I'm just like, Destiny doesn't have the depth to warrant easy acquisition of stuff. I mean, it has depth, but I just don't think we're really at the point, where that's gonna be a thing. Then again, they do say it's a precursor to some larger changes, so maybe this ties into that. Who knows? But moving on, it's kind of after that they discuss about some of the new weapons that are being added to vendors and rituals. And so I'll read these off now and hopefully not butcher any of the names because some of them are weird. So Crucible is getting a stasis submachine gun called the Unending Tempest, which is a cool name. Strikes are getting a solar sniper rifle called Lunar Regalith 3. Gambit is getting a void machine gun called Qua Zafan 5 or V. And Nightfall is getting the kinetic hand cannon Warden's Law and the solar precision bow Pre-Astanax 4. Iron Banner is getting a strand scout rifle called the Guiding Sight and an arc bow called Point of the Stag. Trials of Osiris is getting a solar hand cannon, which is Igneous Hannah, and the strand heavy grenade launcher called Cataphract GL3. Now, some of those are reprised. For example, Warden's Law for Nightfalls is reprised. Point of the Stag is definitely reprised. The Guiding Sight, I think there's a very similarly named scout rifle. I mean, I can have a let's have a quick Google because I swear that sounds like a reprisal that they're changing the element of. Yeah, so yeah, just looking up here, it is both Iron Banner weapons are reprisals. The Guiding Sight was previously a kinetic scout rifle. They're bringing it back as a strand scout rifle. And Point of the Stag was the pinnacle weapon that they had, I believe, or the ritual weapon or whatever for, I believe it was Iron Banner. Though I think it was also released in Season of the Worthy. So yeah, I'm not too sure about how I feel about Iron Banner getting literally two reprised weapons. Sort of thing. They're weird. They have no consistency with these. I wish they just like dropped a whole batch of weapons every year and then kind of reprised throughout the year. That would be my preference, or maybe one or two new ones through the year. You know, like I don't know, 6 weapons with an expansion, 2 reprised, 4 new, and then 2 every other season, 1 new, 1 reprised, or something like that. Cause it's just annoying the way that it's like, oh, we're gonna do 2 reprised weapons, but anyway, yeah. And then Trials is getting the Igneous Hammer coming back. There's not too much to say about the weapons, but I am curious about the Void machine gun for Gambit, what archetype that will be. I actually want to play Gambit because I want to get a good Trust, and I'm sure that what is Trust this season? I think Trust was last season, right? But there's something this season I think I wanted to get as well. I can't quite remember what it was in Gambit. I think it was thinking of Gambit. But again, I've actually not played much of. I don't think I've played any Gambit this season, so. But yeah, they also mention in the sort of the last part of this sort of section that there is a new hand cannon archetype coming in the form of in the form of the Warden's Law. They're reworking it, and they sort of said that they'll talk in the Twid Twab about it, and they did, and so that's what we're getting to now. So in the Twid Twab, which is what I'm calling it, dated 27th of July, they basically detailed the return of Warden's Law and how it's returning onto this different archetype. They sort of discuss, go into how saying that when it released during Forsaken, it fired a vertical spread of 2 shots. I don't actually think I used this weapon very much, so I don't remember much of this. And they're saying that they're revisiting it for next season, and they're reprising it within this new archetype that is changing that spread to a burst of 2 shots. And, according to them, they say that moving from a spread to a burst was, quote unquote, the most important thing to do for this reprisal. They also say that initially when they made that change, it made it feel like the hand cannon Crimson, the exotic hand cannon Crimson, but they said that it never felt like it was quite right, and so that they felt that kind of took something away from Crimson itself. And so they mentioned that during the development of this reprisal, they went through several iterations, eventually, quote, settling on a 2-round burst with a slightly longer delay between shots than normal. Normal bursts fire at 900 RPM, this one fires at 600 RPM, end quote. And they kind of go into a bit of a deep dive kind of on how they sort of built it. And they specifically start talking about the balancing of the weapon. And they obviously say that they knew they wanted to give the archetype good reasoning to be used over other similar hand cannons like 120 RPM models. That is to say, they want the gun, basically, they want it to feel good before you even add perks. And they say that the weapon is generally harder to use than normal hand cannons because you need to obviously hit the 2 shots per trigger pull rather than just a single one. And because of that, they decided that they wanted it essentially to, quote, deal slightly more critical hit damage, letting it kill just a bit faster than something like Igneous Hammer, end quote. And then they kind of, a bit after that, they sort of go into more of specific tuning statistics. And the weapons team specifically say, quote, we utilized the damage profile that aggressive frame hand cannons had some years back, dealing up to 90 per burst against players, 25 per body, 45 per crit. Then we slightly reduced the burst delay, which is the time between bursts themselves, as opposed to the time between shots within the burst, so that it has a slightly faster 0.93 seconds time to kill instead of the standard 1 second, end quote. And they sort of then talk about the recoil patterns, saying that they obviously have to be careful tuning it because they want it to feel manageable, but kind of also wanted you to use perks to kind of improve upon it. And then they also say that the pattern is important because the tightness of that burst also affects how usable it is going to be at longer ranges. And with it having more damage, they obviously didn't want it reaching the same range as other 120 RPM hand cannons. And they say specifically, quote, "We designed the recoil pattern in such a way that, without manual recoil and a little bit of help from perks, it would be more difficult to land 2 crits from the same burst at 35 meters plus, or more than 35 meters away, while still maintaining a smooth feel and decent ease of use at closer ranges," end quote. Yeah, and this is one of the situations where there's not actually too much that I personally have to say about it, but I think it's really cool that they're kind of experimenting with this, and it's interesting to hear that kind of like thought process of how they go through, building these weapons. It kind of shows that there's actually a lot of work goes into this single weapon. Obviously, it's a new archetype, but it's also like, this is only going to be seen in one weapon. Obviously, it could be that there's maybe another weapon of this archetype mixed in there, but it's really interesting, and they've also been releasing quite a few new archetypes. We've got obviously this coming next season. I believe Season of the Seraph had aggressive glaives, which I think was the first time it showed up. They didn't change much about them, but they guess did more damage. I was hoping it had a different melee attack. That's the main thing. Is that like, if you're gonna do something with glaives, like please make it so that the glaive does different melees or has like quicker, faster attacks or shorter attacks or whatever. Well, unless they wanted to keep it, feeling the same melee wise, because they wanted to, they're only adjusting the stats of the ranged ability. But they also, in Season of the Seraph as well, as part of Spire of the Watcher, they had the double grenade firing grenade launcher sort of thing. And I remember back in, I think it was Season of the Haunted, they had like the 3-burst linear fusion rifle with, is it called Storm Chaser? I think it's called Storm Chaser. I think. Let's do it live. Let's hold on. Let's Google it. Yeah, I think it's, is it Storm Chaser? Yeah, Storm Chaser comes from Duality. Yeah, really cool weapon design as well. That was also when they added I believe a stasis waveframe grenade launcher, which I think was the first of its kind as well. But yeah, this is really cool. I do think, it's much what I said before, but perks and weapons do generally need to diversify more often, since it feels like the same perks are being hunted across the board. For example, we're getting a lot of damage-based perks, and I wish, I hope we get to see weapons deepen further, or have more interesting choices that you can sort of pick, with both subclass integration, but sort of outside of stat tuning, just more things that are actually going to change the way that the gun feels, and just how, but I think that also applies to like the sandbox as well. But all that is obviously more easier than ever because of crafting, and so the game sort of becomes, I think, generally easier as a whole. But yeah, that's pretty much it for, I think, all the news. That was a long segment. Was that like an hour talking on that? No, that was an hour talking about what's going on in the game and news. So I guess that's fine. But to just wrap this up, I wanted to talk about one final topic that has been on my mind recently, and that's kind of basically about why some players get so defensive of Bungie. And I'll be honest, when I wrote this next section, it got a little bit out of control when I was writing it, because I basically wrote so much. And so I want to outline a few of these main points first, and then afterwards it might become a little bit all over the place and things like that. And so generally, the points I want to make is that I think Bungie, even though they do a lot of the great stuff, many of the things they get criticized for, I do believe they deserve. In terms of the game, we're talking specifically about the game. This doesn't, this does not include harassment, because harassment and, just all that shit is just, like, totally uncalled for, and there's too much of that. There's too many people, we recently had that with, like, that court case that Bungie won. There's too much harassment to game devs in general and community managers, and that is a problem, and I don't really know how you can properly stop that, but people need to realize that it is just a game at the end of the day. But criticizing the product and what has been made, and the design decisions made and things like that, I think is well within anyone's right, and it's, I think a lot of it is deserved in a lot of ways, but I do think there is also more nuance with that, and so I'll get into that in a minute. I think people that defend Bungie should understand the critiques and not defend Bungie without good reason, which is often, it feels like, what happens. For example, when people complain about PvP, some will say, "Oh, but Destiny's a PvE game." But to me, it's a pointless and terrible argument, especially when Joe Blackburn, he's the game director, has stated several times that they do care about PvP and it's an important part of the game. But obviously, that is an area that they need to invest in more. And for me personally, like, my personal critiques from Destiny come from a place of care and, like, passion, but also one of relative understanding of game development and design, and I have experience and have studied both of those. So when I'm talking about the game, it's not necessarily, like, I can fire off opinions and maybe be wrong and maybe get things, maybe I don't articulate my point very well sometimes, but it's not entirely as if, especially when I've spent a while formulating these thoughts and I think about them quite a lot, it's not coming from a total place of, like, I have no idea what I'm talking about, and that is actually proven by many things, but I'll get into that in a bit later. And just as something else, I think the Destiny 2 showcase will be a banger, honestly, and I think many will become less critical as a result, and I do believe that it'll have lots of nostalgia, and I think Final Shape will be great, but I really hope Bungie do wow us with all of that. I don't want to be in the same cycle, and I hope what comes after Final Shape, what Final Shape brings, it kind of transforms the game in a way that really, truly shakes it up, kind of thing. And most importantly, I think Destiny needs to reinvigorate its player base, in terms of trust and passion, and it needs to make what we get feel new, mysterious, and exciting. And that's kind of they're the three things that I think is what Destiny needs to do, beyond Final Shape. But anyway, let's start this kind of long discussion with people that are defending Bungie. To me, there's a lot of excuse making for Bungie, in terms of this, like the whole, game dev is hard, when you criticize people. And this isn't everyone, but there's a lot of people that do this. Now, I used to get accused for defending Bungie a lot, but personally, I think people conflate my criticism, or people always conflate my criticism a lot of the time with me being just generally reasonable and analytical, and they conflate that when they accuse me of being defensive, but it's like, no, I think there's more. Most of the time, I would have a pretty solid reasoning or evidence as to why I would quote-unquote defend Bungie, But to me, it's just about being analytical and just being reasonable, honestly, because some things people complain about, I'm like, you are just being unreasonable, Like, to me, with Lightfall, I'm convinced it's not as people seem to be kind of acting like, they're criticizing it for what it is, and it's like, sure, like, you can do that, but my criticism is still there, but yet there's layers to it, because I'm like, well, sure, I'm going to criticize, like, I will, I still want to write a review proper for it, and it's going to be critical, it's going to be harsh, I think, particularly in terms of the story. Obviously, Strands was really great, but it's not like I am totally oblivious to, from an analytical perspective, looking at Bungie's track record with quality, because Witch Queen was so good. How does that suddenly happen? I look at the past year, I look at where we're at now, I look at what's to come. We don't quite know that right now. We will do soon. And if what is coming soon, if what we get next season and what's coming with Final Shape is really good, I consider myself to be pretty bang on with a lot of this. And now, sure, it could be a fluke, but it's like there's so much evidence and things, and people point this out. There are a lot of people that point this out. But I think many just kind of take things for face value, and they either criticize or scrutinize Bungie or defend them, whichever way they go, without really taking into account a lot of this other stuff, which of course you're going to get on Twitter and other social media, because there's a lack of nuance there, but it just shows that people aren't thinking about things in a deeper way that I believe that I am, and I'm sure other people do as well. And I personally, like, I criticize and scrutinize Bungie because I know how good Destiny can be, and I know the potential it has, and I'm sure Bungie know that as well, which is frustrating because right now the community sentiment is so low, arguably the lowest it's ever been, close to, or maybe beyond, where it was with Curse of Osiris, because I think the difference with Curse of Osiris at that time was that, sure, people weren't enjoying the game, people were down about the game, but we were still invested, and it was a new game, and we were kind of like, they'd given us a good blog post, and it was a long road, but there was things to look forward to, and that is kind of the same here, but we've had this for years now. Like, next year will be 10 years since Destiny 1, and that has been Destiny's life cycle. It's this constant up and down of different things, and maybe that's player-induced a little bit, I don't know, but I think that it is clearly on a deeper level of Bungie that these things, because clearly Bungie are not a bad studio, clearly they can put together some really awesome content and really amazing games, but they don't always hit that bar, and often they are really far from it, and you start being like, wait, how's this happened? How did you do that? You know, and to me, like, the whole game dev is hard excuse I find really frustrating because one, well, these devs that's literally their job, you know, and I know it's hard, and I know it's 100% because as I said, I've worked on a game. I remember working at college and making a program, a really basic program, and the amount of code that was in it, and I was like, holy shit, trying to fix a bug or trying to find problems and fix and figure it all out, for me was obviously I was new to it, but like this was a really small program, but yet the code was pretty in depth. And I'm like, I can't imagine what that's like for a game that probably has what I had for a code for this entire program. They probably have that amount of code or more for like a single weapon, you know. And that is insanity. And plus with weapons, you've got all the maths, and it's really it's obviously impressive, and it is not easy. But these are also people that are trained and are working in these places and have more qualifications than I do, so they obviously would definitely know it more than I do. But a lot of times when people complain about Destiny, it's not to do with game dev. It's hard. It's not like, oh, you know, sometimes people do complain about bugs and server issues. I don't tend to concern myself with much of those things because that's just part and parcel of a live game. That's part and parcel of games in general. I don't think Destiny is in some terrible, broken state. You know, I think the servers had problems, and they seem to have actually fixed that seemingly pretty well. And it seems like they gave us a really nice deep dive, and that was probably the worst it got from my point of view. But generally, I feel like things are doing pretty okay. That things keep happening, like with mods going, but it's not right now. It is not as bad as I think it was a few weeks ago. Obviously there are still things that are being weird, but you know, to me that stuff I don't really scrutinize much because unless it gets out of control, like the server issues, that was a big problem because the servers need to work for the game to work, you know, and obviously that's more of an engineering thing, and I don't know much about that aspect, and I'm sure it's way more difficult than many of us give it credit for. But it's like the currency caps, for example. Like that's not a game dev is hard thing. Like that's either an oversight in terms of like them giving, you know, the caps now being will be 30 rather than technically the 40 now, or it's an intentional decision, you know. But it's like that's a design decision. That's not game dev being hard. That's just an intentional or a decision or an oversight, whichever one. But that's not a result of the game being difficult to make, you know. Maybe there's some aspect of it that is. I don't know. And yeah, I just think a lot of these defenses come across as very fanboyish, and you know they feel like a lot of people just accept whatever Bungie says and are very against any criticism. And I've seen that, and I've experienced it a lot. And I've had people call me a fanboy for defending the game. And at the end of the day, to be honest, it doesn't matter if you criticize the game, people ask why you play it, and if you praise a game or defend or you quote unquote defend Bungie or the game, you are seen as a fanboy basically. And that's just how it goes, and it's pretty frustrating, but that's just the way things are. And I think if you know what I'm on about, like, you know, it's difficult to point to any example, but I think you do know. You know, the article a couple of weeks ago that I spoke about in terms of people that, you know, saying that Destiny 2 isn't the problem its players are, that's kind of a bit of an example of what I mean. But yeah, and as I was sort of alluding to before, like, a lot of people probably don't realize this about me, or maybe don't know it, but especially when you've got, like, you know, in the lack of nuanced space that is Twitter, I refuse to call it X, by the way. But I've made a game before, in Unreal Engine, did it at the college, very basic, obviously, but I've studied a lot of game design and development related topics at school. I've watched GDC talks, I've spoken to devs, I've listened to podcasts, I've heard a lot about the industry. I've obviously followed Destiny very, very closely for many years. I've followed its community. I've read the patch notes. I've been invested in the game. I've played the game for thousands of hours. I've read articles on it. I've watched videos on it. I've heard opinions on it. My understanding of Destiny, I believe, is very high. Obviously, I am not going to know how the game is built fully. Like, I'm not going to know the internal workings of Bungie, what it takes to make things, but I have a decent idea on some level of what it takes, which is why I'm forgiving when it comes to bugs and server issues and things like that. For example, I wrote an extensive deep dive analysis on Trials of Osiris when it launched in Destiny 2, and most of the ideas I fleshed out came up with, some of which were my own, some of which were kind of based on existing ideas that are in Destiny 1 or things like that. but I kind of like added my own sort of flair to them. A lot of those have actually made it into the game. Now I'm not taking credit like, oh, it was Bungie took my ideas, because that's certainly not at all. I highly doubt that was the case. My article probably is not even known. But to me, and I don't even care about that honestly, but to me that's just validation. It shows that clearly I'm on the right track of thinking, because I wasn't totally, and a lot of ideas people say I don't see making it into the game. Sometimes they do, but I feel like a lot of mine have in some form made it into the game. Not every single idea, but a lot of the time when I think of these ideas, I really, especially when I was writing that article, I really like hunkered down and I just kind of like focused on it. And I tried to think, if this was done, how would this affect this? And then I would think about it, and then I would reread it. And I spent a good month on that article going over it over and over again. And I've got like very specific numbers and tuning values, things like that. I'll leave a link in the description if I remember, because I think I think it's a cool article. It's one of my favorite articles. I haven't read it in a while. I don't know if I'll agree with everything. I'm sure some things are wrong, but I think you can get a sense of, clearly, like, I wasn't saying my ideas were amazing, because I was even adding pros and cons to those ideas as well, and I was giving an explanation as to what the intention was and the development behind them, and the sort of theorizing of them. Yeah, and so in other ways, it's not so much just entirely in terms of like game design, but like it's also predictions about the game. I said before Lightfall came out that I don't think the campaign was going to be as good as Witch Queen. I didn't realize how much less, like, lower quality it would be, but I just had it in my mind for some reason. I was just like, Witch Queen felt like it was so good. I have a feeling that the next one will not quite live up to that. Um, but I didn't anticipate it being the way it was. But that was still, I was pretty much right on that. Before Witch Queen was revealed, I predicted that that expansion would have some set of sort of updates to weapons, which obviously we've got with like the crafting and the origin traits and things like that. So that was kind of a thing. When they announced crafting at the Witch Queen reveal, I was immediately skeptical, because I was like, this seems weird for Destiny. Over time, I softened on that. I was like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will be alright, actually. Um, and what we got was a weird system that felt like it trivialized core parts of the game, and yet still right now it feels kind of weird in the game, and I feel like it's still missing a bit of polish and rounding off. I don't quite know exactly what, but just the flow and the way it fits into the game, I think, needs a bit of work still. Um, but it feels like they are actually leaning into crafting and utilizing that system for more, like, you're able to enhance Adept raid weapons from Valve, not Valve Disciple, what's it called? Root of Nightmares. You can enhance the traits on weapons you get from that. So they are implementing and integrating the crafting aspect of the game into the game moreover, which I do think is a good choice. I think that was again one of the things that, when I was actually going to write a crafting deep dive, and I would like a analysis and critique and concept kind of post, very similar to that of my Trials one, and one of the core parts I said was integrating crafting with the game. Make it feel like it's actually a part of this loop that you go through, rather than just having it be the separate thing that just lets you get what you want on weapons, And I think, with what we're gonna get, but there's also a catch 'em all aspect to crafting as well. That I think inherently is. I think that's a cool part of Destiny, but at the same time, I think it's makes things trivialized, and it's just a strange. It is just a strange system, honestly. I really think that. Um, and my current predictions that we're at right now, there's probably a bunch of others I can't remember as well. Like, for example, one I've got here that I've written down was that Kvostov that was in the Lightfall cutscene. A lot of people were, now before launch, I was like, oh, is that coming back? When they hadn't said anything about it. I don't know why, again, they didn't get in front of that and just tell us. But a lot of people wondered where it was, and obviously we found out that it's obviously not in the Lightfall, and it turns out it was just used as, because they didn't have enough time to like get each weapon in. But it's exactly what I said. Another thing, part of what I said was that, because they show you actually looking through the scope, as if you're going to go and spoilers for the ending of Lightfall, you look through the scope to go and shoot your ghost. I'm like, well, they can't do that for every weapon. Plus, typically in cutscenes, it pulls from your kinetic weapon, and kinetic weapons can include special weapons. So you can have a shotgun, a sniper, you could have had a fusion rifle. So they wouldn't have been able to do that same cutscene without the Kvostov kind of thing. Which I don't actually know if they mentioned that specifically with the scope, but they mentioned that, like, they mentioned, like, oh, every player would probably have the Kvostov, so we'll just run with that kind of thing, and that makes sense. But again, it was one of those where I was like, yeah, so I pretty much was bang on again. And my current predictions is that with Lightfall, I think Lightfall was a bit of filler, and because again, something I haven't seen anyone else talk about, if you're adding an expansion and an expansion is filler, well, that's why there'll be 4 seasons that are gonna be filler as well. No one is saying that. People are saying like, because Bungie have spoken about Lightfall being this middle piece, and then like the 2 seasons before it led up to it, and then the 2 seasons afterwards kind of concluded it. And and people are like, oh, that's not a very good way to do things. I'm like, guys, it's because it wasn't intended. Like, I really don't believe that this was like such an experiment that Bungie are making out to be, but they're not going to tell everyone that they just like, oh, it's all filler, guys, sorry. You know, obviously, but it's like the fact that no one thinks outside the box, no one theorizes. Look, I could be totally wrong. If I'm wrong, fair enough, but it's like no one I'm seeing is really, I mean, it could be somewhere out there on Reddit, maybe there is, but in terms of these actual core mainstream spaces, no one is saying this. And I don't know why, because to me, this is like kind of obvious. Like, you just use your head. Like, if an expansion is filler, what about the 4 seasons? They didn't, when they said that they were adding a new expansion on, they didn't just add an expansion, they added 4 extra seasons, which upends the entire plan for the structure of the story. And again, you look at my theory with like, now I personally think Season of the Haunted and Plunder were filler seasons. Seraph was already intended, and that would have led into the final shape, or the original ending, or the original intro to the last expansion. But they kind of like, again, moving things around, and they took the intro of Final Shape and they split, and they put an entire campaign in there. And a lot of people have said about the cutscene, the way the beginning of the way the Lightfall begins and the way it ends, the cutscenes kind of connect together. And I do think that that's and some people have said that, but that's kind of where it stops, and people just be like, yeah, it's filler. And that's kind of where people have gone, and people have been like, yeah, it's generally agreed that it's filler, but no one really kind of dives deeper beyond that, thinks about it more. And not from what I've seen. I'm sure it maybe exists out there. There's actually a video from a guy on YouTube, I can't remember his name, but that I want to check out in regards to that, to see if that's kind of his general point. I didn't realize that was actually posted back in March or May or something like that. I think it was May actually. So I'm curious to watch that. But yeah, my other prediction is that I also think Armour is going to get some kind of update with Final Shape. I'm less confident about this, but I'm also just feeling like in my mind this feels right. This feels like the right time. But to be fair, we did get some build crafting updates with Lightfall, and that might have been classed as that, to be fair. So, which, to be fair, would have lined up with how Forsaken got like the big weapons update with random rolls, and Shadowkeep got the big 6 stats, armor overhaul, armor 3.0 overhaul, and then, Beyond Light, it was just like, it's just stasis, and then Witch Queen was a weapon, and then, but then, I guess you could say with Sun saying that, but that's kind of more of a general economy gear, power level core system thing. But then Witch Queen, had like the weapons update, and you could say Lightfall had the build crafting update. So I could be wrong. There might not be anything coming to Armour, but I really hope that Armour does get some kind of deeper look into as part of Final Shape. But yeah, I don't remember all of what I've said, but there are a lot of things I say. It might be very small, might be very minor, but there's a lot of things I say that I tend to get correct or am close to the mark on, and I think a lot of people would, probably think, oh, it's arrogant to say things like that, but it's like, well, again, I don't mean it from an arrogant point of view, but I have a deeper understanding of game dev as well as my knowledge of Destiny and experience with it, and so I do believe that I have a bit of a, I'm fairly on point. Doesn't mean I'm sure I'm wrong. Like there's things I'm definitely wrong about for sure, but I feel like I'm entertaining and thinking about discussions that you don't get to see in the mainstream space, and maybe people don't have the time to do that. I don't know, but I at least think it's interesting to speak about, and sort of it adds an extra level to a discussion. But not that, again, Twitter and stuff is not a great place for discussion anyway, really. But yeah, as I said before, some people may look at my critique and say I'm wrong. I obviously don't have the same deep understanding of what it takes to build Destiny, but I think my rationale is pretty accurate and on point kind of thing, and a lot of it's kind of built on that kind of background. And as I said, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure other people have said, much like I said about Diablo's Force Game Director, what I said earlier about rarity, that's something I've said for a long time about rarity, about, you don't, things being rare, you have to start, you gotta start off lower, you can't make something super rare. Sorry, you can't make something super easy to get, but you want it to be rare, like, you have to start off making it rare, and you have to see how it plays out, really. And that's how you kind of figure out you can't when you're making something rare, you have to start on the lower end, otherwise you totally screw up the possibility of it ever being properly rare. But yeah, that's pretty much it for that bit. I obviously mentioned about Bungie deserving the scrutiny that they come under. As I said, I think a majority of complaints are to the design and implementation of features in Destiny, or the lack thereof, where Bungie are failing to live up to or even surpass the standards they kind of set for themselves. It feels like they're often undercutting themselves. But it can also, it can be down to this quality and execution. That's the case for Lightfall, for example. But I think most of the time, rather than thinking outside of the box and kind of considering more of this like deeper level and deeper understanding of Destiny, people just instead accept any information and take it entirely for face value. Now, I'm not saying Bungie are lying, but I do think there are certain like telltale signs that have been given over the years that kind of show a path and a clear structure and direction for Destiny. And a release like Lightfall, its execution and a lot of the elements surrounding it kind of suggest that clearly something wasn't intended or wasn't right with it. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, that's just how Destiny is. Oh, Bungie are, whatever, expletive this, and any criticism they want to throw out just for being cynical or whatever it is. But that's really one-dimensional to me to think that way, because to me it forgoes any acknowledgement of fair critique of Bungie's past successes. You think about Witch Queen, you think about how good that campaign was. People just seem to forget that, And that, to be fair, that is a good point that I agree with in that article. As much as I criticized it a couple of weeks ago, I do think the general sentiment of how people don't always think about what we've gotten. Now that maybe comes across as a fanboy a way of looking at things, but it's not intended like that. What I just mean is that you can't say that Bungie are terrible at what they do, because clearly they have much proof that they are not. As far as I'm concerned, Destiny is an incredibly unique game. No other game is doing what Destiny is doing in this same way, really. And a lot of the time, I think I get optimism, for example. Like I get the optimism players have, and I sometimes am in that space, but I also think it's because I look beyond what we're getting, kind of thing. I think about it, I'm like, why has this happened? And I think a lot of people don't care about that stuff, and they just complain and bitch about it, kind of thing. And I think, well, there's a deeper level to this, but no one entertains it, really. And I think when you understand that and you consider that, it gives you a little bit more optimism. Whether or not we'll be correct or not, whether or not I'll be correct, sorry, I don't know, but I'm fairly confident that I will. And I think Final Ship's gonna be really good, as I said. Destiny is great in many ways, and in other ways it's not. It's not, and it's not meeting those standards. Like most recently, people are criticizing the monetization of Destiny, for example. And a lot of people some people will be like, oh yeah, but game dev, it's hard, or it costs a lot, and it's like, well, these aren't statements because they know necessarily. These are statements because they've just been told it, and it's not that they are wrong, but it's sort of like, again, it's not looking beyond things what it feels like a lot of the time, and especially when you think about something like the monetization, it can feel like Bungie are nickel and diming the existing core player base who are already paying, and it can feel a bit slimy when you're the player, because it sort of feels like, we all love this game, but it's like, come on, like, not everything has to have like a current, like a paid avenue towards it, not everything has to be, or not everything needs to, you don't need to like force money out of us. I wish they didn't, kind of thing. And like Transmog, for example, is like something that people asked for years. I was never huge on it. Like, I was kind of like, again, I was like, is this gonna take away from Destiny's chase? And I think it does a little bit. But when Bungie finally added that, they chose to make it so that you could only have 10 currency. You can only earn 10 currencies per character per season. And then if you wanted to bypass that, you'd have to pay money. And it's like, I find that just really I guess disingenuous, but just disrespectful in a way. I'm like, people have asked for this for years and years, and you chose to turn it into something to make money out of. Now, business-wise, sure, it makes sense, but I'm really curious to know how much money they're making off Transmog, because as far as I'm concerned, that is, of all the monetization changes they can make, Transmog is like the thing I look at and go, change that, remove the cap. Just to remove the cap. Maybe you can keep it being purchasable if people don't want to do the grind, sure. I don't care about that. But just make it so that if you want to play and earn it, you can. If you want to buy it, you can. Easy peasy. It's easier said than done, probably, in terms of whether or not it's likely or not from a business perspective, but that is something that I think Bungie should do. But yeah, looking beyond that a little bit and just kind of, I think sort of, I think this is where I am. And yeah, a little bit getting close to the end here. Bungie have had a bit of a weird track record since Destiny came out, and it is rather frustrating that this is the way things have gone. As I said, Lightfall, as far as I can surmise, it's the result of bad planning, albeit potentially, a byproduct of this, a sincere necessity for more dev time on final shape, what's to come afterwards, or, as I suggested earlier, maybe it was to get Strand out there, so they delayed, they had a new expansion stuff just so they could not screw up the story of the end and get have one subclass per expansion, or at least have a subclass in the expansion rather than trying to drop it elsewhere. So I think that the decision to give more time was smart, but obviously as a result we get lackluster content in a certain way as well. But I think when you look at it like that, you can at least appreciate that maybe you can appreciate the situation and understand that maybe that clearly there's maybe a bit more to this. And it's like I said before, you don't announce a trilogy of expansions with a very clearly strong direction, then delay the saga's end, then suddenly change the theming of one of those releases, but not before you've pushed the best Destiny campaign to date. Like it just doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make you can't. How do you do that? And to me, Lightfall was dropping as Bungie dropping the ball so hard that there's obviously more at play here. And anyone that suggests otherwise either doesn't have faith in Bungie or isn't really properly in the know with Destiny's history, you know, or that kind of sudden shift with like the reveal and execution of Beyond Light and the Witch Queen. When they announced Beyond Light and they announced Witch Queen and Lightfall, that was unprecedented. Like, what the hell? Like, they've just announced 3 expansions. We've never had that in Destiny's history. And when you played Witch Queen, and then when you finish the campaign, and you have that great story, and then you have the tease at the end about the witness, that is direction. That shows there is a huge shift that's gone on at Bungie. And Beyond Light was kind of the prologue to that. I don't think it quite hit the same, definitely didn't hit the same level. But it was still the beginning of that. And I think Season of the Chosen, Splicer, and Lost really showed that even more. Like, they changed the season model, and it was like tons of story. It was, again, unprecedented. So when you follow that up with Witch Queen, I'm like, what the hell? Like, where's this come from? And to me, it shows strong direction. And Lightfall is such a 180 on that it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't believe it. And again, you have to think about, again, as I mentioned, with Strand and things like that. And it's weird when you think about the subclasses, because it seems like we're gonna have 3 subclasses but 4 expansions, and that seems kind of weird considering originally they only announced 3 expansions. So it sounds like something changed. Again, that's like I said. But yeah, there's a lot more I could say on this. Again, this was kind of all over the place, I think, a little bit. So just for some final thoughts, my general issue here is kind of just like how there's a lack of like nuanced conversation with a lot of these things, because I wish that there was these greater detailed conversations that we could all get into, because Destiny is a unique game, very unique game with lots to like, and it's been the core from which many communities have been born, grown, and flourished. And it's like socially, it's had a very profound impact in that regard, but it's also been the source of much inspiration and kind of very direct copying. A lot of games with the loot, rarity, and virtual cursor stuff has clearly happened after Destiny 1 released, and it's like, oh, I wonder, I wonder where you got that idea from. I wonder why you're doing that. And it's like, despite all the criticism, Destiny has been a very influential game, you know. And I'm of the belief that Destiny definitely deserves much of that success. But as a product and a piece of media to be critiqued, there are many ways I think Bungie are given far too much leeway by a lot of people. Even though I understand their connection to the community and I understand that. But that's great. But it's like, but the criticism people give is to make it better, And I think that's when you get a situation where people are all over the place, and now people are burning out because people have kind of given up on, people are giving up on the game because they're kind of fed up with the direction it's been going in. And people have been doing this over and like for a long time, and more people are actually staying away from the game or not coming back as often or not sticking with it. And at the same time, Life was a great success for Bungie, but I also think that this has been the biggest drop off of players to date, because they had such a big rise with Lightfall. I think that was recently on Steam, at least. I think that the player count has gone down a lot. So, I hope that a lot of the criticism that's being given right now does have an impact, and it does lead to change. And I hope Bungie acknowledges it, and I hope we get that. And I hope that if people's criticisms and critiques aren't addressed at this showcase, that people continue to go on about them. And I'm specifically focusing on PvP, because Bungie, as far as I know, have not really addressed any of the criticisms from the last month or two that have been going on, really at all. They've just kind of carried on churning out their usual stuff, and you know, and I'm sure Final Shape is going to have a great reveal. I'm sure the showcase will be strong. It's going to have a lot of nostalgia, but based on the sense where the sentiment's at right now, I think it's going to have to do a lot. But I do believe that Bungie will still deliver a great showcase. And I just hope that the future is bright, if you know what I mean, and not feeling like we're just retreading the same path that we've been on for so long now. And like I said, I hope that if that showcase doesn't, or the showcase or kind of discussions around that time don't address core critiques of the game, specifically surrounding PvP, I hope many do continue to scrutinize Bungie, because they are essentially stringing people along, or people are stringing themselves along, I guess, while they're not getting what they want, kind of thing. Or then and I feel like Destiny's potential isn't quite being realized. So yeah. So I think I'll, after talking for so long there, I think I'll wrap it all up there. That's kind of, I don't actually know how long I went on about that, but yeah, I think next episode looks like we're going to be talking about, we obviously got some new insight articles that are going to be coming out. We'll probably place some final bets on the D2 showcase, maybe make some predictions. Maybe let's go wild next episode. Let's and depending on what we depending on any teasers or leaks, if we hopefully don't get many, hopefully we can keep things under wraps and keep things surprising outside of official teasers and things. But it should be cool if we have those to discuss by that point. But I think when we get there, like I think let's make some wild predictions. Let's go crazy. Let's get really hyped for no reason. One thing I just want to know in regards to this show is that obviously there will be one more episode of the show before the showcase. That'll be the week before, so that'll be the 22nd of August is the showcase. This will be on the 14th of August, I believe, should be the next episode, or it might be the 15th, depending on when it falls. But the next episode after that obviously won't be till the following week, so it won't be till the week after the showcase, so probably the 28th or 29th of August. And since there'll be a lot to cover, I imagine my plan is to do a Untitled Destiny Podcast extra episode, and that will go up on the Friday of the week of that showcase, so hopefully the 25th. That's my intent, unless there's not much to talk about, then we'll just wait until the following week, we'll see. But that'll be good to kind of reflect and kind of look back at the showcase and see what's happened. And as I said, I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about. I'm sure the showcase will be really good. But we'll, we'll go through that all over again on the next episode. And all of this, sorry, on the next episode, next actual episode. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed. Be sure to leave any questions you have in the comments below, and I will speak to you more, again, about Destiny stuff and whatever else in the next 2 weeks, unless suddenly something wild happens, and maybe I'll do a sudden extra episode in between now and then, but we will see. And yeah, for now, thanks for listening, and have a good one. Ciao, ciao, ciao.